It's time for another marathon video. And in this big, long marathon video, I'm going to be showing y'all basically 12 recipes, all using 100% fresh milled wheat. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, I teach you all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. We only use 100% freshly milled grains on this channel, and I teach you all about why you should be using freshly milled grains and whole grains, all from a biblical perspective. And I love doing it. It's a passion of mine. So this is actually another marathon video of videos that I've already posted to my channel, but we're going back, okay? We going back to 2023 when I was participating in the Make Bread 365 challenge. And what this challenge was it was a challenge started by McKenzie with Little Farm Folk over on Instagram. And I love her so much. If you're really into homesteading and all of those things, you really should go follow her. She's super, super sweet and a friend of mine, a virtual friend of mine. And I thought that this was brilliant. And she gathered other creators together. And again, this was mainly on Instagram. And she challenged us to bake a different type of bread each month, and then everyone could participate. It was completely free to participate. And I have to say, like, it stretched me. I definitely did it because I wanted to be challenged for the year, because several of these breads I probably never would have made on my own unless I had been kind of forced in a way to do it. So in this is it was 12 months, and you can actually still go and see all of these recipes. Just go to grainsandgrit.com/makebread365 for a list of all the recipes and the links. I will also be posting them in the description box below. There will also be timestamps available, so if there's a particular recipe you are looking for, then you can just go to that section. And I will be popping in and out throughout these videos, in between each video, to kind of give some extra information, some kind of behind the scenes, some tips that I've learned since then, so on and so forth, if I feel the need that it needs to be there. So hopefully you enjoy this marathon, that it inspires you to stretch beyond your comfort zone to actually be baking more breads, all with 100% fresh milled wheat. And thanks again to McKenzie for doing this challenge. And yeah, so we get to throw it back to 2023, y'all. Enjoy. It's bread baking day, so in this video, let me show you how I bake bread with 100% freshly milled wheat. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit, where we talk about all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. It's actually been 2 years since I posted my very first video, which actually was my simple yeast bread loaf recipe using 100% freshly milled wheat. And so I figured it was time for an update. So as I'm baking bread today, I'm going to be showing you guys how I'm doing it these days. Good news, my actual recipe has not changed, but I have tweaked a little bit of the size that I do, things like that. So do know that this printable recipe is still available on my website, and it will be in the description box below so you can print it out. If you're already familiar with this recipe, then feel free to bake along with me. So let's get started. So of course, first off, we gotta select some wheat berries today. Don't be jealous of my fancy schmancy Post-it note labels. So my favorite combination at the moment is actually half hard red wheat, half hard white wheat. However, bottom line is you need a hard wheat berry. You can use all hard red, you can use all hard white, and if you're starting out, start with these two grains. They are the easiest to deal with. So we're gonna grab both of these and get to milling. All right, so we have our wheat, and this is, for anyone who's been along for any length of time, is Miss Betsy Bosch. I love her so much. This is a Bosch Universal Mixer. Another thing to point out about my recipe is people often ask me, do you have, a recipe for one loaf? I don't need as much. And I actually do, and that's in my ingredients quick sheet that you can grab. It's completely free. It's my little cheat sheet that I have. It not only has the ingredients for 1 loaf, 2 loaf, or 3 loaves, but it also has my most used recipes. So be sure to grab that, because that'll be the easiest reference to know if you're only wanting 1 loaf. Whether, again, you're using a mixer, kneading by hand, the steps are the same. And do know I have a video all about kneading by hand for you guys. I'll link that below. But with our Bosch Universal Mixer, I do have the dough hook and the little, I think it's called dough hook extender that we have here. And our first step is actually very simple. We're going to take our freshly milled wheat and we're just going to create basically not a proof, not a levain. I guess it's kind of like a levain. But bottom line, we're going to put some of our flour in here with all of our yeast, all of our water, let it sit, get that yeast going and activated. That's really going to help give your bread a boost when it comes to the rising time. So for this, the total amount of flour that we're going to be needing is anywhere from 9 to 9.5 cups of flour. That is about 6 cups of wheat berries that you will be milling. Now, this is not an exact science with freshly milled wheat. You may find that you need more or less flour depending on the day. If it's humid, if it's cold, if it's raining, things like those type of issues with the weather that can affect your bread. And this is why I do not weigh my ingredients. I just measure them and it works out fine. And you'll see what I mean later on when we're into the kneading section. But for now, no matter what the weather is, we're gonna do, I like to put for this one, 3 cups of flour in here. It doesn't have to be exact. If it's a little over, that's totally fine. 3 cups of flour. And then we're adding 2¼ tablespoons of instant yeast. I do prefer instant yeast. You can use active yeast, but if you're using active yeast, this proofing process is a must do. You have to do what I'm doing here to get that yeast activated. Otherwise, with instant yeast, you technically can skip this step, but I don't like it. All right, and then we have 3 3/4 cups of warm water. And so let's mix this up real quick. And now we're just gonna let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. All right, so here we have it after about 15 minutes. So you see that it is a little bit bubbly. You can't really tell on video, but it has actually risen a bit as well. And that's what we're looking for. So now we just need to add the rest of our ingredients. Remember, we've already put 3 cups of flour in here. We've got our yeast and we've got our water. Now we need to add the rest of our flour that's needed, our salt, and our honey and oil. So this is our 1/2 cup oil, 1/2 cup of honey. And then we're adding our 3 1/4 teaspoon salt. This is Redmond salt, my favorite salt. And now here's where we add our flour. Now, key to this, whether you're kneading by hand or by a mixer, the recipe calls for 9 to 9.5 cups of flour. You do not want to just dump in all of that flour. With all-purpose flour, you generally can do that. You can't do that with freshly milled wheat because you could end up with too much flour or not enough. So what I like to do is, if the recipe calls, in this case, for 9 to 9.5 cups of flour, I'm going to now add a total of 8 cups of flour in here. Start kneading and mixing it together, and we're going to be going from there. So we already have 3 in. So this is 4, 5, and 8. And then, very important, putting the lid on, trust me. And then let's start mixing this up. Just want to show you guys here. Now in the mixer, or again, by hand, this is crucial. And I think this is where some people get either too dense of a bread, not turning out. In our mixer, where I'm going to want to add enough flour to where it just starts to pull off the bowl. And this is pretty much the same if you're kneading by hand. But from here, I do not measure my flour. I generally just add 1/4 at a time until it is good. And that's what you're looking for. So again, at this point, you don't want to be so obsessed with the measurements. Just starting adding a little bit at a time until it starts getting to that point. And one thing to add is with a mixer and by hand, add a 1/4 cup at a time and then wait a little bit. Let it get incorporated before just continually adding more in. So I usually wait a good 15-20 seconds. I don't count, just to make sure that it's going in before adding more. All right, that is definitely good where it's starting to pull off the bowl. I don't bother scraping this down because with the kneading process, it's gonna eventually get all of this as well. And now in my Bosch, we knead for about I set the timer and I knead this for 9 minutes. If you were kneading by hand, you're gonna need maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll start noticing that, see how right now it looks, it's not smooth looking at all. It's gonna easily break apart. We're now looking for it when it looks smooth, and when it's ready, we'll go from there for other tips. So I'll see you back here in 9 minutes. So here we are after 9 minutes. It comes up a little bit. One thing I forgot to mention is the kneading speed that I was kneading this at. It was just at the 1 setting. That's more than enough for what I need. So here we go with our dough. And what you're looking for, and this is something that is so difficult to communicate on camera, is I'm wanting a soft dough. And with my dough, I actually like it to be slightly sticky. And your dough will feel slightly different depending on the wheat that you have been using. But bottom line is that's a good dough. It is pliable, I can work with it. Let's actually get it out of here. On a large surface, it can be a large cutting board. I just like to sprinkle a little bit of the freshly milled flour that I have left over. If you notice the bowl, it's pretty clean, and that's a good sign that I added enough flour. It's not too sticky, too doughy. And this is actually really good. Sometimes I do, if I'm gonna err on one side, it is going to be to have a bit more of a sticky dough, because you can always add flour. You can't take it away. So it is just, especially if I start getting in the middle, you can see it is just slightly sticky where it's sticking to my hands. If you've kneaded it and it's still really, really sticky, no problem. Just add some flour into your hands, rub it, and then start gently working the dough. And it's pulling dough from here, flour from here as well, until it gets to where basically you can work with it. Even though it's slightly sticky, I can still work with this dough. I do not want to add too much flour because my bread will be too dense. So now we have a big clump of dough and all the possibilities. Again, my original recipe, this is enough to make 2 2-pound loaves, but I'm actually no longer doing that anymore. I actually now make 3 smaller loaves with these. Now again, to be perfect, you could weigh the dough balls to get an even amount to make sure your loaves turn out well, which I do, especially if I'm selling the bread and I want it to look prettier. But I have enough experience where I'm just gonna eyeball it. And from this, we're getting 3 loaves. And these loaves are gonna be a bit over 1 pound loaves. If I remember right, when I weigh these, they're usually around like 1 pound, 8, 9, 10 ounces each, roughly. We have our dough now. So let's set it aside and start working one at a time. And this is also an important step, the shaping process. If I need to, I add a little bit of flour down to it, and now we shape it. Love these little, these are called a pastry roller, and we're gonna roll it out into a rectangle. This I'm rolling out to about like half an inch, 3/4 of an inch thick. It doesn't matter really too much, but you do want it rolled out enough that you can work. Okay, folding. One side, you pull out a little bit and you bring it in. And then the other side, stretch it out a little bit, roll it over. And then you start at one end and you pull a little bit, roll. Pull back a little bit, roll. Pull back a little bit, roll. Pull back a little bit and roll. And now you have a weird jelly donut type shape. And now you just kind of smooth this over a bit. Okay. And this just takes a little practice. I find that it helps to have it on a counter where you can kind of pull a bit here. Okay, and you're wanting a nice loaf shape. And I'll keep working at it, tucking it under where the sides are fairly smooth, that's not fairly smooth. So I want to kind of work at it a little bit more. And I definitely want my top to be smooth, because if I find that I already have like a rip or something at the top, it's going to rip the bread coming out. Now, not a big deal for my family, still edible, still good, but you know, if I'm selling it, it doesn't look quite as pretty. And that right there looks pretty good. The sides look good, the bottom a little ugly. That's what we want. And then we place it gently into our pan. Now let's do some more. And here we go. Now you just cover it up. This is a beautiful tea towel, huge tea towel, 100% cotton, I believe. One of my followers gave to me, who lives local, Miss Phyllis. Hey. So bottom line is you just want to cover it with something light. Don't do a heavy dish towel. That will weigh your bread down. So if you have baby receiving blankets, those are awesome. Or the flour sack cloths. I like to actually keep the dough on top of my oven while we preheat the oven to 350 degrees. And this bread with the instant yeast will be risen in about 30-35 minutes. And I only do one rise. That's why I love this recipe. It is shorter, it is quicker than others, but the results are wonderful. Okay, it has been about 30-35 minutes, and you can see these have risen beautifully. You want it about an inch above the pan. Obviously the middle one rose more. It was a bigger bit of dough, but this looks good. Now just make sure you don't rise it too much because it is going to continue rising in the oven. So now let's get these bad boys in the oven, 350 degrees, and bake for 35 minutes. And here we are after 35 minutes. They are looking absolutely beautiful. So we're going to pull them out and let them rest in the pans for 10 minutes. All right, so it's been about 10 minutes. So we are putting our loaves on cooling racks because if you keep them in the pan, they will get a little moist. So we're going to carefully dump here. Let's just look at these loaves so you can see they are nice and tall, but not too ginormous. This one's my largest one that you can see. Let me kind of do it here, but they look beautiful. This is one that I actually purposely left a little split on the side where it wasn't completely smooth, and you can see this is what happens if it's not completely smooth, but not the end of the world. So now the difficult part where we have to let them cool. Now you don't have to let them cool, but just be aware that if you go ahead and slice into them hot, that it will cause your loaf to deflate a little bit. So I've done it before, push comes to shove, and I needed to do that, and that's fine. I like to cool them on their side, one, because Julia Child said so, and two, it does keep your bread from kind of decompressing. And cover them up again, and I will be back here when these are completely cool. And now the time has come. They are cooled down, and now time to slice to see what it looks like on the inside. So you can see the outside looks great. Now let's check the inside. And this is my Cutco bread knife. It's a great little bread knife that I found at a flea market. And so it will be easier to slice the next day. But as you can see, it slices very well. And on the inside, it is nice and soft. There are no huge holes or anything. This is not the bread where we want the holes. And now to prove no holes, let's cut in the middle of the bread to see what it looks like. And as you can see, there are no gaping holes in the middle of the loaf as well, which is where usually you will find the big holes. And here's also a slice. I can get it thinner usually the next day, but just to give you an idea of a slice. As always, I hope that this was a helpful recipe for y'all, especially to you newbies. And as always, I will talk to y'all next week. Bye. Let's make some focaccia bread with 100% freshly milled wheat. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel we talk all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So one of the main requests that I get is definitely more recipe videos, and this is going to be one of them. This recipe is actually part of our Make Bread 365 challenge, which is more of a challenge going on Instagram. And for the month of February, the bread is focaccia. And so that's what we're going to be making today. The wonderful thing about focaccia bread is it's actually not difficult at all to make. You're actually going to be seeing it where I'm not even kneading it. I'm not needing a mixer, nothing like that. So for those of you who don't have the fancy mixers or wanting more of a no-knead bread, this is really great for y'all. And I'm going to be showing y'all how I love focaccia bread the most, but feel free to add your own toppings, your own flavors. This is truly a very versatile recipe. So let's get started. All right, first off, we're going to proof our yeast. So we're going to grab 1.5 cups of warm water, 1 teaspoon of honey or sugar, and then 2¼ teaspoons of instant yeast. And then we're going to stir this all together, and we're going to let it sit here for anywhere between 5 to 10 minutes until it's nice and foamy. Even though I'm using instant yeast and technically don't have to do this, I do prefer to do this because it does give that yeast a bit of an oomph, and I also make sure that the yeast is still good. And while that is proofing, let's talk about our yeast. I prefer a combination of hard white wheat and soft white wheat. So you're going to grab yourself 2 cups of hard white wheat berries and a 1/2 cup of soft white wheat berries, and you're just going to throw both of these into your mill, mix them up to get the amount of flour that we need. Now we have our yeast that's all nice and foamy. This is looking great. And now let's start mixing the dough together. So this is the flour that I've already milled. I just milled them all together. So grab you a large bowl and then measure out 3 3/4 cups of this flour mixture. And you can see I don't have much flour left over. And then you're going to grab 1½ teaspoons of salt, and then we're going to mix it. This is a Danish dough hook. I'll link it below for you guys. It just makes it easier. And then we're going to add all of our yeast mixture into this as well. And then we just start mixing this up. This is going to be a sticky dough. That is what we're going for. And it's going to be a bit on the stiff side as well. That is normal also. Once we get it all together, we're going to grab 1 tablespoon of olive oil and dump that into the bread. And then I actually like to put it on my hands a little bit and then start mixing this dough a bit further by hand to make sure all of that olive oil is nice and incorporated. And as you can see, the dough does stick together, but it's definitely not a super crazy soft dough yet. So I just like to kind of shape it here into a circle. We're going to put it back into the bowl, and any olive oil I have left over, I kind of take that, rub it on my hands, kind of coat it a little bit as well, just to give it a little bit of extra moisture. And then we're going to leave it in the bowl, cover it with a plastic wrap, and then I like to cover it with a little towel over that as well. And we're going to let it rest for 30 minutes. And here it is after resting 30 minutes. It has risen, as you can see, kind of almost double, but remove the plastic wrap, and now we're going to start with our stretch and fold. And so you're just going to take it from one side, pull it gently, fold over, another side, pull it gently, fold over, another side, pull it up gently and fold over, and then one more time, pull it up gently and fold it over. So you do this 4 times with the stretching. And then we're going to place the plastic wrap back onto the bowl with a towel over it and let it rest another 30 minutes. And we're going to do this multiple times. So I like to keep a sticky note here to keep track of how many times I have done a stretch and fold. 30 minutes is up, and we're going to do our second stretch and fold. So same technique as before. Each time you do this, you should be noticing the dough getting a bit softer. That's what we're going for. It's developing that gluten content, but without actual kneading. So it is taking a bit longer. So plastic wrap back on, towel back on, mark it on your sticky note, and 30 minutes again. So it's been our final 30 minutes, and now we're going to do our final stretch and fold. But instead of letting it rest in the bowl again, you will see that after we do our final stretch and fold here, that we're then going to shape it and put it into our pan to do its final rise to bake. So once we have that, we're gonna grab a 9x13 pan. Ideally, you want it to be non-stick. Mine is not. So we're gonna add a 1/4 cup of extra virgin olive oil. Because mine is not a true non-stick pan, I'm actually adding a little bit more than that to coat the sides of the pan. And then you take your dough and you're going to just lather it in to that olive oil. And then we're gonna slowly start stretching it out to the shape of the pan. Now, if your dough is breaking at this point, stop what you're doing and cover it up. Wait for about another 10 to 15 minutes to let the dough rest and then resume this process. But by now it should be soft enough where it's going to stretch out nicely into the 9x13 pan. And then once we get it done here, you can see it again, it's thoroughly coated with olive oil. We're then just going to let it do its final rise, which for me can be anywhere from 45 to 50 minutes. So you do want to make sure that it's basically doubling in size. And you just cover it back up with saran wrap again and a towel and let it rise in a nice warm spot. While that's rising, I like to mix up my topping. So we have 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 2 tablespoons of water, 2 cloves of garlic, minced or more if you like, and then half a teaspoon of salt. And then we just mix all this together and set it aside until we need it. Now the dough has risen twice in size, and now to give it that typical dimpled focaccia look. And so we're going to gently use your fingers and make these little dimples in the bread. Do not go all the way down to the bottom of the dough. I find that that flattens it a bit. But once you have your dimples, you're then going to take that topping mixture and pour it all over the top. Try to get it as even as possible. And then I like to add a little bit more salt to this. And on top of the salt, I like to just sprinkle on some rosemary as well. Of course, this can be fresh as well. And now it's time to bake in a 450-degree oven for about 20 to 22 minutes. And here it is. You can tell because the crust is a bit crusty. And then you do immediately want to get it onto a cooling rack. And then as you can see, it is a flat bread, but it is absolutely delicious. And here we are going to slice it up. So I've got it on my little cutting board here. Using a bread knife, it's just very easy to slice off. Of course, you can just cut it as well and enjoy it, but there it is on the inside. This is absolutely delicious, a wonderful garlic bread. Here's a bit close up as well. Ideally, you want to go for more holes, but this is pretty good. There you have it. Easy peasy. Let me know in the comments below what are your favorite toppings and flavors when it comes to focaccia bread. This is an excellent Italian type bread to be served with spaghetti, pasta of your choice, lasagna, whatever it is. It is just something that is just delightful and different than your typical yeast bread loaves. As always, I hope this was helpful, and follow along with our Make Bread 365 challenge on Instagram. You can find me there at Grains and Grit. I hope you'll have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye. If you're a lover of Mexican food or specifically Tex-Mex, you're definitely going to want to watch this video, because in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to make soft and delicious flour tortillas using 100% freshly milled wheat. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia. On this channel, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So in this video, as I stated, I'm going to be showing you how I make my own flour tortillas that took me forever to actually figure out. But with these flour tortillas, we're using 100% freshly milled wheat, and they come out soft. You can fold them over, they don't break, and they are super good. This recipe is actually March recipe for our Make Bread 365 challenge, where we're challenging ourselves to no longer buy bread from the store. And all through this year of 2023, each month we have a different recipe for y'all that you can follow along. And of course, with Grains and Grit, all of our recipes will have nothing but 100% freshly milled grains. So if you haven't heard about this challenge, then be sure to check it out. For all the details, just go to grainsandgrit.com/makebread365. And that's also where I keep the recipes for the year as well. For flour tortillas, it actually is not that difficult. of a recipe, and no fancy mixers or anything like that are needed. It's very easy to do by hand. So let's get started. So first off, we need to mill our wheat berries. I like to use a soft white wheat berry to get a soft flour tortilla. You're just going to mill 2 cups of soft white wheat berries into a fine flour as normal that you usually do for a bread. You just need a fine flour here. And then to a bowl, we are going to add 2.5 cups of the freshly milled soft white wheat flour. And to that, we are going to add 1.5 teaspoons of salt, and then 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder. And then here's just a pastry cutter that I use to just mix all of this in together. And then we're going to add a 1/3 cup of lard. You can use shortening here, but I prefer not to use shortening. I definitely prefer to use lard. Let's have the real deal here, people. And then just like we do with biscuits and other recipes, we're going to cut in the lard until it resembles like this coarse structure that you see here. So it's just kind of looks like a really coarse flour. And then we're going to take our 1 cup of hot water, but don't just dump it all in because it could vary day by day. So I just put a little bit of time, and then I like to use my Danish dough hook to start mixing it up. Add more water as needed. Basically, you're just wanting to mix it up until it's all incorporated together and it's pulling off the sides of the bowl like it is here. It is going to look like a rough dough, and that's fine because then we're going to take it out and lightly dust our surface, and then we're going to knead it a bit. So you're probably going to need to put some flour on your hands and then start kneading. I like to use a scraper so I don't have to add more flour until you get a soft dough like this. It's nice and smooth and soft. And then we're going to divide it into our 10 little balls. So this recipe makes about 10 tortillas. Of course, you can make them bigger or smaller, but bottom line is you're wanting, this roughly makes about 10. You can weigh them to make sure that they're exact same size. I do not bother. I eyeball it. And then we just roll them up into smooth balls like you see here. And once we do that, we just are then going to place them on a platter. And then I like to take a little bit of extra lard, rub it over my hands as such, and then kind of pat them over all of the little tortilla balls. And then we need to let it rest. So cover this up with saran wrap. And then I would just like to cover up with an extra towel and let it rest for at least 30 minutes. After it rests, you're going to need a frying pan. This is about a 10-inch. I like to use non-stick, and then a good roller here. And then we're going to, again, lightly dust our surface. And this is where it's just going to take some practice to roll these out by hand to get a good shape. I find when I use a tortilla press, it does not stay rolled out. It likes to shrink back in. So that's why I like to roll it out by hand. So as you can just see here, it just takes a little bit of maneuvering, just kind of going back and forth. Don't let it stick to your rolling pin. So always just add a little bit of flour as needed just to make sure it's not sticking. And then we get it to the size. These are about 8-inch size tortillas. And once it's rolled out to a good size, you can see here that it is nice and thin, and it's not really going to be tearing. If you are experiencing tearing, you can, first of all, just fix it like this if it's a little tear. Otherwise, you may need to let your balls rest a bit longer. And here we have a frying pan that's preheated pretty hot. I have it on generally my hottest setting. And this is about maybe 15-20 seconds. You're going to start seeing these wonderful little bubbles to start to rise. And that's what you want to see. And once I see several bubbles, I then flip it over. It's looking great on the other side. Wait about another 15-20 seconds. And then this looks great. And then I remove it and put it into a basically a towel lined bowl. So let's do this again in sped up mode. So here I am. So as one is cooking, you can see that I'm rolling out another tortilla. And this really doesn't take too much time, especially once you get the hang of it. But you want it to bubble up like that, really nice. And you know that it's time to flip it. You're generally going to just kind of figure this out. But as you can see, these are a bit darker spots than I typically like. And so when I see them where they're a bit darker, I do turn down my heat just a little bit. And this is an adjustment that you may have to do. But here they are all in a bowl. And as you can see, they're nice and warm. Well, you can't see that they're warm, but they're nice and warm, but they're soft and they fold over very easily. You want to keep them like this to keep them warm. And as you can see, they're not breaking apart when I roll them together, and they're absolutely delicious. And to serve with a meal, just make sure that you keep them covered like this to keep them nice and hot. And that's it, y'all. I would have tortillas to show you now, except I did make them for supper and my family completely devoured them in about 0.5 seconds. So no more flour tortillas to show you right now, but these are super, super good. And like I said, pretty easy. The main thing that you need to work on is rolling them out where they actually look pretty, but ultimately what matters is that they taste really good. As always, just remember there is a printable recipe for you guys in the description box below. All my recipes are on my website, grainsandgrit.com/recipes. And hopefully y'all are joining us for the Make Bread 365 challenge. Again, details on my website for that as well. Hopefully y'all enjoy these wonderful, delicious flour tortillas. Do remember, if you're looking for corn tortillas, I have already done videos on that as well, and I'll link those in the description box. Hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye. All right, so popping in here because, full disclosure, around this time of 2023, things kind of got a bit, the schedule got thrown off. And so I actually was unable to record a bagel recipe. Thankfully, my friend Michael Gropp, I've actually interviewed here on this channel. She actually has a bagel recipe with 100% freshly milled wheat. And I will be linking that for y'all below. And that's also on the website, grainsandgrit.com/makebread365. But I do not have any video for bagels. I have done it, but I have not made a video of it. And so I really probably should get on that. But Michael Gropp is awesome. Her recipe, I definitely do recommend. And I'll add bagels to my list of recipes that I need to get to y'all. So yeah, there's one short this year, but technically there would be 12 recipes. Didn't have this one. So, and let me know if you have a bagel recipe, comment below with your favorite bagel recipe. Otherwise, just check hers out. And sorry, I don't have that video, but I did at least get all the other ones done for the year. Welcome to the May Make Bread 365 challenge recipe video. This one's gonna be a bit different because this month is artisan bread, but we're gonna kind of put a twist on that this month. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So I'm just quickly putting an intro and outro here because this recipe I am recording while I'm baking it for my family for supper that night. So things have been a bit crazy around here lately, so forgive the not so fancy intro. But this month is artisan bread, and I was kind of trying to get a sourdough bread out for y'all, but that was not working with 100% freshly milled wheat. I still have not gotten it to where I'm comfortable sharing a video about it. So that is coming hopefully this month, maybe next month. But in the meantime, I did kind of find a hack cheater style artisan bread that actually includes a recipe that you already have, and that is using my simple yeast bread loaf recipe. So before I get all the hater comments like, this isn't artisan bread, okay, so I actually did some research about what artisan bread is. And basically, if you do a quick Google search, the basic definition of artisan bread is handmade bread made in small batches. But the Le Cordon Bleu from France, their definition of it is generally made by hand using longer and more traditional processes. So this is definitely where we get sourdough. We associate sourdough with artisan bread, which is totally legit. And I agree. And I do think that true artisan bread does require like the longer fermenting times, things like that. But you know what? I haven't figured that out yet with 100% freshly milled wheat, because you can get that with white flour. You can get that with half and half. Way difficult and a whole different ball of wax when it comes to 100% freshly milled wheat. So I actually discovered kind of a hack where I get the look of the artisan bread, that crunchy crust. It does not have the big gaping holes in the middle, but bottom line, it is a delicious bread that looks really great. And bonus points, you can eat this straight out of the oven. Yes, you can serve a hot loaf style type bread on the table for supper, piping hot, and it is amazing. Pretty much the best thing ever. So it used to be where only my rolls I would serve hot, because my sandwich breads you don't want to slice because it'll actually cause them to fall. Not this bread, y'all. So you get the crunchy crust, but the soft middle, you can just rip it apart. This is what we do. We just have people break off pieces for supper, and it is wonderful and just something new and different than just here's my sliced bread from sandwiches or my rolls that I do a lot as well. Now, one thing how this is an artisan bread, and basically everything we do here, I would say it's classified as artisan type bread because we are using 100% freshly milled wheat, which, let's face it, y'all, that's old school to be milling your own wheat. So we're already doing old school methods, even though this one does have commercial yeast in it. But basically it's just my simple yeast bread loaf recipe, but we're going to twist it up a bit. I'm going to show you how it's done. Now, another thing I would like to introduce in this video is a different type of wheat that I am using. This is the first time that I'm using a heritage wheat, it's a turkey red winter wheat that I got from Guardian Grains. I highly recommend them. They are excellent grains and they have great quality, and they ship straight to your house, and their prices are reasonable as well. And definitely a small company that you're working with. This is not sponsored or anything, but they did send me these grains so I could experiment with. And I have to say, I'm quite pleased with the turkey red. I find that it works a lot like hard red wheat. Still a really great flavor, and that's what we're using for this recipe. I do have a discount code for you guys for Guardian Grains. I think it's 15% off, which is amazing. And again, the grains are shipped straight to your house. So be sure to check out the description box in the description link in the box below, you know what I mean, to be able to get that discount as well. So thanks for Guardian Grains for doing these heritage type wheats. Again, first time using turkey red, and it turned out really well. Okay, so on to the recipe. All right, you know the drill. We just first add 3 cups of our freshly milled turkey red wheat. We add 2 1/4 tablespoons of yeast, 3 3/4 cups of warm water, mix it together, let it sit until nice and bubbly for about 15 minutes. And it's nice and bubbly. Remove the lid if you're using the Brioche, and then we add our 1/2 cup of oil, 1/2 cup of honey, 3 1/4 teaspoons of salt. And then we just slowly start adding our flour. I like to add an additional 5 cups of flour roughly, basically, and then start mixing, and then slowly add in flour until I see that it's starting to pool off the sides of the bowl. And then we start our kneading. So as you can see, here it is, it's starting to pull off the sides of the bowl. And this is whenever I start my timer for kneading. This is the Brioche Universal Mixer, and I'm just gonna knead for 9 minutes. And then here's the dough. It is a bit sticky and tacky. People ask me about this all the time. This is how I like it coming out of the mixer, where it's still a bit tacky. And then I lightly flour my surface, dump out my dough. And then from here, I just like to lightly flour my hands as necessary and just start kind of working this dough a little bit more where it's not as tacky. And this is how I find to make it not as dense, making sure I'm not adding too much flour. And you can see it's still a little bit tacky. That's fine. And then now I just divide up the dough into 3 pieces, and I do weigh it for this particular recipe. I do weigh it to try and get even amounts. And each one came out to be about 1 pound, 12 ounces. And then here's my Banneton basket. I just really flour it. The Banneton basket is what gives it those nice lines. You can use a clean towel in a bowl as well. And then here I just kind of fold it. We're just gonna be making it into a little ball. The key that I found is you really wanna make sure you flour your surface well with whatever you're putting it in, because you don't want that bread to stick. And then once I kind of have it tucked in, you can see I'm slightly tucking it in, have it a nice tight little ball. Flip it upside down into the Banneton basket, and then I just cover it up and let it rise until it's about double in size. And just while for your entertainment, here I am shaping the other loaves into just normal loaves. So I'm kind of killing 2 birds with 1 stone here. And while I shape these other loaves, for those who may be confused, this recipe is just my simple yeast bread loaf recipe. It's on my website, and it's kind of the dough to rule them all. You can do so many things with this, hence why out of the same dough, I'm making just regular sandwich loaves as well, which I'm doing here. So that's why I like to go ahead and make them in these larger batches. You can cut this recipe in half if you need less, but this is how I like it so far. And then I just cover these up, let these rise as well. And here, this one is already risen. You get some parchment paper. I like putting a plate on top to make sure I don't destroy the dough. Flip it over, and this is the moment of truth to make sure you floured that bowl really well, because when you lift it up, this is what you want it to look like. And then we just score it however we want. My razor blade, unfortunately, was not as sharp as I was wanting, so make sure you have a sharp blade to score it in whatever pattern you're wanting to do. And while this was going, I was preheating my oven to 425 degrees with the Dutch oven in it. So this is a hot Dutch oven. We're going to place the bread in there, put it in there, bake for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then we remove the lid to bake it another about 8 to 10 minutes. And then here it is. And then you can just use a thermometer to make sure the bread is 190 degrees, but look at it. It is beautiful. It has a crunchy crust, and here we get more close-ups. I could have had better scoring. I need to work on that, but bottom line, here it is. And like I said, you can just rip this bread, tear it apart, but I'm being fancy and slicing it so you can see the inside. No, not the big holes that you get from typical sourdough breads, but hey, it's delicious. So there you have it, y'all. Unfortunately, I do not have a loaf to show you here because it's always devoured at supper, and I have no leftovers. So again, whenever I was recording this video, it was to get it right straight to the table, and that's what it did, and we have nothing to show from it. So hopefully this was helpful for y'all. Do know again that you can vary the cook times length based on how crunchy you would like that crust to be. As always, I hope this video was helpful. Printable recipe in the description box below, and be sure to follow us along on our Make Bread 365 challenge on Instagram. It's great fun. We're having a lot of fun over there, and if you make this recipe, be sure to tag me in it and use that hashtag as well. So as always, hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you next week. Happy June, y'all, if you can even believe it. So today, I'm actually doing all the things, but in between the things, I'm going to be showing y'all how to make English muffins with 100% freshly milled wheat. This is the June bread for our Make Bread 365 challenge. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and once again, I'm tucked away in a little corner of my kitchen because it's a full-blown working kitchen. I'm doing some canning today, or like a lot of canning today, but I need to record this video. I'm squeezing in the English muffin recipe that I'm going to show y'all. And at the end, I may include some bonus video of canning behind the scenes, but we'll see how I feel. So again, this is part of the Make Bread 365 challenge. It's a challenge that was started by McKenzie over on Instagram with Little Farm Folk. I'll leave all of her information down below. But basically the challenge is each month, me and several other content creators, bloggers, YouTubers are coming out with recipes for one particular bread that month to encourage y'all to not buy bread from the store for the year 2023. So to get more information about this challenge and to follow along, definitely follow me over on Instagram. It's just Grains and Grit over on Instagram. And then I also have the information on my website. If you just go to grainsandgrit.com/makebread365, that is where I'm giving you information about the challenge, as well as the links to the recipes, equipment that I recommend, so on and so forth. Of course, on this channel, we're all about 100% freshly milled wheat. So other people participating in this challenge, they may be doing sourdough, all-purpose flour, a half and half. But for me, all of our recipes, y'all know, is nothing but freshly milled wheat. Let's get on to the recipe. So first things first about this recipe, I'm actually going to be doubling it for my size family. But the printed recipe is just regular amounts that will yield about 12 to 14 English muffins. So just know that what I'm going to be telling you is going to be what's on my printable recipe. But what you see is doubling of the recipe. So first of all, we are going to start with 3/4 cup warm milk. Just warm it up to, just a general warm. And then we need 1/2 cup of warm water. And we're going to combine those, pretty simple. And then we're going to add in 2 tablespoons of sugar. That was the yeast. Oops. Okay, so that's the yeast that I added. Oh, wow, this is what happens when I'm recording and trying to cook. Okay, real life, y'all. My brain is scattered today. Okay, so if you go ahead and add the yeast, that's fine. So this is actually the sugar. So 2 tablespoons of sugar, and then you add 2 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast. And bottom line, you're just stirring it together. We're just proofing this, y'all. We just need it to proof and get all nice and bubbly. This will be about 5 or 7 minutes. And just make sure you whisk everything together to where it's pretty dissolved. All right, and we're going to let that sit there for about 5 to 7 minutes. In the meantime, we're going to be getting our dry ingredients. This is the Nutrimel Artiste, aka Miss Annie. I have named her Annie. She's my new mixer, and I will be planning on doing a review of this later on, but we're going to be using her today for this recipe. So while the yeast mixture is proofing, just to get it all nice and bubbly, remember this is also a good way to tell if your yeast is bad. If it doesn't bubble, your yeast is bad, throw it out. Okay, but here we are, Miss Annie. We're first going to start with our whisk attachments, and then we're going to be moving to our paddle attachments. If you don't have those, you can use the dough hook. Don't stress. So let's put in our dry ingredients. And bonus points today, I'm actually using a wheat I have not used before on this channel, and we are using Camus. Now, it's also called Croissant. Camus is the trademark name. Croissant is the general wheat name. So know that. So I have that milled here. I find that Camus works wonderfully with this recipe. It gives such a smooth dough, which we will see. But if you do not have Camus/Croissant, you can use, I would recommend hard white wheat. You can even use a hard red wheat. Just know it's going to be a bit nuttier type of a flavor, not a milder flavor that English muffins have. So I do recommend trying out the Camus. It is an ancient grain. It definitely is more expensive, harder to get a hold of. Just know on my website, I think the places that have them is Pleasant Hill Grain and Country Life Foods. So I have those on my website. Just go to grainsandgrit.com/buy-grains to be able to get the links for that, because I have a coupon code for Country Life Foods. I don't know if Azure Standard has Camus. I know years ago they ran out, like 2020, they ran out, and I don't know if it's come back yet. So there you go. Okay, so we're going to be adding 2 3/4 cup of Camus. Basically for this, you want to mill 2 cups of Croissant or Camus wheat berries. Mill about 2 cups of that to give you the amount of flour. You will have a little bit left over, but you are going to need a little bit for dusting. Since this is an expensive wheat berry, any leftover, I put it in a quart-sized plastic baggie and I stick it in my freezer and I pull that out, whenever I have it, but you're not going to have too much left over. So we're going to be adding 2 3/4 cups of Camus. You may need a full 3 cups, but we're going to see. Again, this is freshly milled grain. It can vary. So we're going to add this in here. Remember, I am doubling this recipe. And then we're also going to add our salt. 1 teaspoon of salt. I do love my Redmond salt. I have a coupon code for you guys, again, on my website. Now, we're just going to whisk these 2 together, and then we will switch to a different attachment. Now I'm going to be switching these out from the whisk to, I'm actually going to be using the cake paddles. Again, if you do not have these sets, you can just use your dough hook. So here we have our nice bubbly yeast mixture. It's been about 5-7 minutes. And to this, we're going to add 3 tablespoons of melted butter. And then we need 1 large egg. Now, here's the thing with adding egg. If you just melted this butter and it's hot, like I just put in, don't add your eggs straight to it, because you may scramble your eggs, which is not good. And another note, if you were like me and you have your own chickens, I've actually got some new layers, so my eggs are smaller. And when I have small eggs, I actually just use 2. 2 eggs. So what you saw was 3 eggs. Again, I'm doubling the recipe, and that is because 2 of them are small eggs, so that equals 1 large egg, and then to double it, that actually was a larger egg that I had. And we're gonna just combine these, whisk them together to make sure the egg is incorporated, and then we're gonna be adding it into our flour mixture. Here we go, Nutrimala cheese. We have the cake paddles. We're gonna go ahead and put the lid on and start mixing on low while I'm adding the liquid mixture to it. And once I've added all of them in, I'm now gonna turn this up to about a medium. Okay, I'm gonna pause this. So what I'm looking for is just like bread dough, is because again, with freshly milled wheat, you may need a little bit more flour, a little less. So always go a little bit on the underside. You can always add more, you cannot take less. So as you can see, it's a very doughy mixture. This is going to be a stickier type dough at first. That's why we're using the paddles instead of the dough hook. But again, it kind of doesn't matter. But what I am looking for that is similar to know that I've had enough flour and when to start the kneading time is whenever it's just a little bit starting to pull off the sides of the bowl. We're not wanting it as much as with bread pulling off the sides, kneading, but you do want it a little bit. If it's just really looking like it's not coming together, just add a teeny bit more flour until it looks like it's starting to come together. We are forming a dough, we will see in a minute, but not quite as heavy or stiff as a bread dough. I really wish y'all could feel this, but I'm trying to explain it as best I can. So let's go ahead and get this started. Okay, so as you can see here, it's kind of, I don't know if you can see it, it's kind of like splattering onto the sides, and that's generally telling me I need to add just a teensy bit more flour. I'm going to add ever so much. This is maybe like 2 tablespoons. On the Artiste, I have this on the number 2 setting right now. I would probably keep it on the 1 if you're using the Bosch Universal Mixer. It's still not exactly pulling off the sides of the bowl, so I'm going to add just a little bit more. Okay, so here I added just a little bit more, and you can see it's just starting to pull off. Now I want to start the kneading time, and we just need to knead this for about 5 minutes. So I'm actually stopping it. It actually did not take the full 5 minutes, because what I'm looking for, and you can see it's like all over the place, but you can see the type of dough. It is sticky, but not quite super sticky, like between a sticky and a tackiness. And again, this is also just part of how Camus is. It is going to just be a bit more sticky. It probably is the same feeling as if I was to do this with einkorn. So now we remove these. And again, this stuff, you can see how it's stretching and pulling, but not like a batter. It's not a batter. It's still a dough, but just a very, like a much looser, softer dough. Okay, from here comes the easy part. Now we just need to let it rest. So I'm gonna pull this out and I'm gonna show you kind of what it looks like, and hopefully you get a better picture of the type of dough this is. What we need to do now is we need to go ahead and get a greased bowl. I just use a stainless steel one, a glass one is fine. And we're gonna just put the dough in here. Now do know anytime I remove dough from a Bosch or an Artiste, I like to remove the drive so dough does not get on it. You can see here, let me put this here. So this is the dough. It's coming off that spatula. So again, it's tacky. It's very tacky. So here we have it. And as you can see, I can actually do a stretch and fold. So if you've done like sourdough, no knead breads before, but this is extremely soft. So that's what the dough should look like. It is tacky. It's getting less so. And I can easily do a stretch and fold it. We'll break a little bit, that's fine. And now we cover this up and we're gonna let it rise. Now you have multiple options here. You can let it rise for at least an hour and deal with it. But the thing with this, with English muffins, is I actually prefer to put it in the fridge and let it proof overnight. And that is for flavor. The flavor really enhances the longer it sits. So you can just whip this together up at night and then bring it out in the morning. So that's what I'm gonna do. And then what I do is tomorrow morning, I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna pull it out. It needs to sit out room temperature for at least an hour before baking it up. So let's put some plastic on this. I'm gonna put it in the fridge and I will see you guys tomorrow. And hopefully my kitchen won't be such a disaster zone tomorrow. All right, so here we are the next day, and now we're just going to take our dough and we're going to heavily flour the surface. This is just the camus flour that I had milled, and I'm putting quite a bit of flour on here because again, this is quite a sticky dough, and we're just going to dump it out here. It's still going to be sticky, and so I'm actually going to add just a little bit more flour on the top and then start gently kind of working it in with the flour, but also start just spreading it out. I don't like to roll it out because I kind of want to keep the dough light and not like squashed together. And I roll this out to about an inch thick, and then we're just gonna cut out like we do biscuits. This is a really cool cutter that Michael Gropp sent me. I'll link it below. And we just cut these out, as you can see, and then we're gonna take some cornmeal or corn flour. I mill it myself, a cookie sheet, put a ton on there because we don't want these muffins to stick, these English muffins to stick. And so then we just gently place them onto our dusted cookie sheet. And again, corn flour is used. That's just what traditionally is to use. You can use a corn meal, but bottom line, we just need to get them on there. That's just traditionally used to give you that dusty type look that English muffins have. And once you use up that, we just roll up the dough, and then we just do it all over again until we have used up the dough. And then at the very end, with that last little piece, I then roll that up into a basic shape for a mini English muffin. And now we're going to just cover it up with a light tea towel and let these rise for about 30 minutes. And here they are about 30 minutes later. They can rise a little bit more than this. And then we're going to grab our pan. I do prefer cast iron in this. And you're going to heat it on a low setting until you just start to feel the heat in the pan like I just did there. And we are dusting it again with cornmeal and then placing those English muffins on there for 5 minutes with a lid. And then don't do what I did here where the pan was way too hot. You're seeing smoke like this. You can see I slightly burned them. So no, y'all, I'm not perfect. That is okay. If you're not sure where your heat should be, just try one of these muffins first. But you know, they were a little bit burned, but my family still devoured these. They actually were not burned, just a bit more toasty on the top. So whenever you do these, make sure that you brush out the cornmeal before you put another batch in because we don't want it to burn. So we're gonna try this again and actually not burn them this time. So again, you cook them with the lid for 5 minutes, you flip them over, and these are looking perfect, put the lid back on and cook them for about another 5 minutes. And here they are. They look beautiful. They have that perfect crusty top on it. They're the right thickness. And here's a plate of them. It was much bigger. And so I actually did a little treat today. I decided to try eggs Benedict. So I'm cutting open an English muffin. I already had some melted butter, so I'm just putting that on there, and then some poached eggs, which I did for the first time today, and I'm pleased to say they turned out, and hollandaise sauce, which I also did for the first time, and that's what I served for supper. So here they are, some eggs Benedict. My family was not a huge fan of the hollandaise sauce. I just need to try it again. I think I messed it up, but there you go. So again, the printable recipe is in the description box below on my website. Be sure to follow us with the Make Bread 365 challenge. If you make these, post it to Instagram, use the hashtag MakeBread365, tag me in it as well. As always, if y'all have any questions, let me know in the comments below. And I hopefully this was helpful for y'all, and y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see y'all next week. So as promised, here are the canned goods that I did. I got 7 jars of this. Is like a chicken and gravy. So this is chicken that we raised ourselves, but it's basically a meal in a jar. Really excited about that. And I went ahead and canned some sweet potatoes. We did not grow these, unfortunately, but I wanted to go ahead and get some canned. And then I had leftover chicken stock, so I went ahead and got, I had enough for 6 quart jars to be canned. So there you go. Had a productive day, and you've seen part of my canning supply. Popping in here again because we are halfway through the year. Let me tell you, y'all, these recipes, I think McKenzie might have done this a little on purpose because these recipes definitely got more challenging as the year went on. And so next up we have baguettes. But first, halfway through, and now is a great time for a coffee break. So hold on. This is one of my favorite coffees right now, Verena Street, along with 7 Weeks coffee. But I'm telling you, you want some good coffee? This is it. This is also my favorite mug. All right. Got my coffee. So now we can continue this marathon. So if you need a little coffee break as well, do love my coffees. And unfortunately, I can never go back to typical cheap store-bought coffee, Verena Street, and 7 Weeks coffee as well. I'll link them both below. They have definitely ruined me with coffee because it's so good. Like, oh, kind of like whenever you mill your own grains, and you realize the quality. Yeah, same thing. So you've been warned, but also you're welcome. So next up, we have the later part of the year, the next 6 months, which was definitely more challenging, and ended up with the one recipe that I was dreading the most, which was croissants, which I knew would stretch my limits like none other. So let's continue with the marathon. It's July 2023, which means it is time for a new recipe for our Make Bread 365 challenge. And this month it is baguettes. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia. On this channel, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. Now you may be wondering, what in the world where am I? Well, I'm actually out of my shed because I was thinking about this video and it dawned on me that I have not, I never recorded an intro and an outro. So I did not make the recipe in my shed. So rest assured, I'm just filming an intro and outro for you guys just really quick because I've got to get it done and this is real life and just how it is. It is also July in Florida, and as you can see, it is about 1,123.2% humidity, to be exact. You can check my math. So for those of you who do not know, I'm participating in the Make Bread 365 challenge, which is a challenge started by Little Farm Folk, McKenzie over there on Instagram. It's more of an Instagram challenge where we're challenging ourselves to not have to buy bread from the store for all of 2023. And so every single month there's a new recipe that me and many other creators, we share with you guys. And each month is a specific bread. So July is baguettes, and good news, you kind of get 2 recipes in one here because the recipe I use for baguettes is the exact same recipe I use for French bread. Just, change up the shape. Voila. You have French bread and then you have baguettes. So whichever one you want, this recipe will work. I also only use 100% freshly milled wheat. So there are other creators that use store-bought flour. They may be sourdough, whatever the case may be. But here on this channel, all of our recipes are only using 100% freshly milled wheat. So no store-bought flour or anything like that here. So if all this sounds great to you, be sure to follow me over on Instagram at Grains and Grit. Hashtag MakeBread365 is the hashtag. So be sure to post all your creations, and also be sure to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Click the like to this video so more people on YouTube see it, and hit the bell icon as well to be notified of future videos. Now, before we get into this recipe, a couple things. First of all, I highly recommend you using hard white wheat. And a little secret, one thing I've discovered is not all hard white wheat act the same with this recipe. Don't ask me why, but Pleasant Hill grain, for some reason, is the best hard white wheat to use for this. Now, of course, I have not used every single person's hard white wheat, but I have used Pleasant Hill grains for a while, and then I switched. Then I had wheat berries from another company. I can't even remember what they were. I just know that they were not Pleasant Hill grain, and the recipe actually did not turn out as well. It still was fine, but not quite like it. So something's going on with the hard white wheat berries with Pleasant Hill grain, that is just working. So no, but anyway, just use hard white wheat berries. You also could possibly use Camus, but I haven't tried it yet. So do not, so I'm not sure about that. Another thing is I have noticed a huge difference in using the yeast. I do prefer the instant yeast with this recipe than the active dry yeast. If you have active dry yeast, again, you can use it, but I find that it takes much longer to rise and get where I'm wanting it to go. All right, so let's get out of the shed for a bit so we can make this recipe. First off, we're just going to make a sponge. So this is hard white wheat from Pleasant Hill Grain. For some reason, this is the best wheat to use. But we are just adding about 2.5 cups of flour, freshly milled in here, as well as 1.5 tablespoons of sugar, and then just 2 cups of warm water. We're going to mix this all together. And once that's all mixed up, we're just going to add in our 1 tablespoon of instant yeast and mix this up to proof for about 15 to 20 minutes, depending on how cold or hot it is in your house, until it's nice and bubbly. I do prefer to use instant yeast. I have used active yeast before, but it just takes much longer to rise. I just find that it works better with instant yeast. So let this sit for 15 minutes, and then after that, you'll see that it's nice and bubbly. We're then going to add our 1 tablespoon of oil, 2.5 teaspoons of salt. I do also prefer to use olive oil in here. And then I'm going to add just 2 cups of flour, and then we're going to go from there. So I start to mix it together because you don't want to just dump in flour for freshly milled wheat, because it's going to change every day when you make this. So when I start to see it pull off the sides of the bowl like this, this is whenever I generally want to start my kneading time. Now I will say, for some reason with this recipe, it can be a little bit. I do like to knead for 9 minutes, but as you will see later on, I did have to come in partially towards the end of the kneading because I found that it was too sticky and I needed to add a little bit more flour. So you do want to monitor this. And whenever I did add in more flour, I started with like a tablespoon, if even that. So you can see that here. I had about 2 minutes left, and it just needed just a little bit. It was just too sticky. So again, this is just something you're going to have to watch. And what I do have a printable recipe for y'all below, but this can vary based on the type of wheat that you're using, how much humidity is in the air. For those who've watched my simple yeast bread loaf video, and this is just part of bread baking with freshly milled wheat. But I generally know you're just going to get a better feel for this whenever you do it more. I'm just going for a soft dough. And again, we're just still kneading it. It's still sticking a little bit to the bowl, but I much prefer to go on the side of tacky or slightly too sticky during the kneading process like this, because I just don't want it to be too dense. You add too much flour, it's going to be too dense of a bread. So it's been after 9 minutes. I stop it, and as you can see, it is what I would call tacky. The dough is sticking to my hands just a little bit, as you can see here, but I'm able to pull it apart and it's not breaking off. So it's a little tacky. Remember, we can always add a little flour. We can't take it away. And so this is how I like it. So don't freak out if it's like this. I also never do the window pane thing. I just don't do it. So we're going to get this off my hands, and now we're just going to let it rise. I am totally fine rising it in the bowl here. This is the Nutrimel Artiste that I'm using, not my Bosch. So this is Miss Annie Artiste that I'm using, and we're just going to let this dough rise for about 30 minutes, maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour. It all depends. But in the meantime, bonus, I'm going to show you how I make my spaghetti. So while this is rising, I go ahead and start my spaghetti. So this is just some ground beef, grass-fed ground beef. I add some onion powder, some garlic powder. I do not measure, I just eyeball it. And then I do add some salt to the meat, and then I just brown that up. This is a super simple spaghetti, nothing fancy, but my kids love it. And I can make it while I'm making the bread. This is also one of those meat thingies from the Pampered Chef that I love. It breaks it up so well. And then disclosure, I don't have pasta down. So yes, that is store-bought pasta that you see. I know. And then for my tomato sauce, all that I do is it's crushed tomatoes with salt and Italian seasoning. And then I add the ground beef in. Super cheap, super simple. And my kids and my family love this. Okay, so here we are. We're just checking on the dough. It has pretty much doubled. It's kind of hard to tell in this type of bowl. But here I want to talk about the pans. This right here is a baguette pan I got from Pleasant Hill Grain. I will link it below. I also have the French bread pan for this as well. And this recipe, again, can be used for French bread or baguettes. It's just all goes into shaping it. If you don't have one of these pans, you can just get a clean tea towel like this and kind of bunch it up, kind of fold it like this, and you place a loaf there, you place a loaf in the middle. That way they can rise and not touch each other. You do want to make sure that that's floured down to keep everything from sticking. But I do like the pans because it helps get that crispier crust. Now, here is the dough. It is still a little tacky, which again is what I like. But again, do not automatically go to adding more flour. Now here I'm saying if you're doing French bread, just cut it in half. I'm doing these 3 baguettes, so I'm just cutting it into 3 dough balls. But again, I just want to emphasize these scrapers are great because this allows you to scrape off the dough without adding more flour. And then if necessary, you can either just lightly flour your hands or use a little bit of water. Now, I do like to lightly flour the surface when it comes to shaping because as I roll it down, it's going to stick and then the whole shaping does no good. But the shaping is important to this. So I roll it out very similar to my yeast bread loaves, my regular bread loaves, but here we're going to kind of fold this, take a third of it, fold it where it's in the middle, and then we're going to kind of push it down a little bit, and then we fold it over again, kind of close up that crease, and then we just roll it out to the size that I need. Obviously, if you're doing French bread, it's going to be a little bit shorter, but these are long baguettes, and basically once you get a little dough worm over here, then I just place it into my baguette pan and kind of shape it to where it's fairly even so I don't have a completely wonky loaf. And then we're just going to shape the other ones. So again, when shaping, you're just going to take about a third of the dough, gently pull it out, push it down, fold it over to kind of the middle of the dough, and then kind of seal up the seams there, and then roll it over again, seal up the seams, and then gently be rolling it out. And the ends, I like to taper them off into little tapers, not just a blunt edge. But this part may take a little practice. I have found if I do not do it this way, the inside will not turn out right. The crumb on the inside will not be right. I actually got this method from, I think, one of Peter Reinhardt's cookbooks, where he actually talks about shaping baguettes and bread loaves and all the things. So thank you, Peter Reinhardt, for your wonderful knowledge. And here we are. We're going to cover up with a tea towel. This is one from Michael Gropp, and I love it. And then while they are rising, we need to preheat the oven to 425 degrees. And while everything is rising and we're preheating, we're going to make the garlic butter. So this is just softened 1 stick of butter and almost an entire garlic clove. I add a little bit of Italian seasoning in and then put it in a pretty bowl. And then I like to top it with just some parsley to make it look a little pretty. But this is absolutely delicious. And here it is. It's about 25-30 minutes later, and it's time to now score the bread. I'm still not great at scoring, but here you go. And then you can either spritz it with water, or I can gently brush it with water, or you can do an egg wash here. Just if you do an egg wash, it will be more brown on top. And then we're just going to place it into our 425 degree oven for 10 minutes. And then after 10 minutes, we're going to turn it down to 375 degrees. Don't open up the oven for another about 15 minutes. And then here I have my beautiful cutting board, and here they are. They look absolutely beautiful. And I like just go ahead and putting it on a cutting board. I'll link this one below. It actually comes with a bread knife, and the crumbs fall down in between those grooves. So this is the perfect one to serve at the table or to allow people to do it themselves, because then you don't have crumbs everywhere. They fall right in. And then I actually like to let this rest for about 10 minutes before cutting it. And here they are. The best way to have these is hot. You can either break it off or slice it, but these turn out well. I know they're not like super perfect shape. I'm still working on it, but the bottom line is that it's soft on the inside. You can see I could have gone a little bit crunchier on the crust, but I'm not too concerned about it for me, because I think my family kind of likes it a bit less crunchy with the baguettes. So that's the bread knife that comes with it here. And again, you can either just have them or they're breaking it off, but for supper, I'm just going to slice them here for everyone. I did have to grab a little tea towel because wowzers, this bread is super hot, so just be careful when slicing it. And then there's our garlic butter, and here is the inside of it. So you can see it's beautiful, it's soft, it's fluffy on the inside with that slight bit of crunch on the outside. And of course, this is how I'm buttering it now. You can open it up, butter it however which way you want. Don't stress, it's delicious. And then here we are with the fake pasta spaghetti and just add some Parmesan cheese on top. My spaghetti sauce usually is not this runny, but I had to add some diced tomatoes and I didn't drain it, so that's my fault. But here it is. This was supper tonight, y'all, and I did all this kind of at the same time. So it took me about a couple hours, but it was delicious with fresh bread for supper. There you have it, y'all. Bada bing, bada boom. This was actually so delicious. I'll be honest, I'm still working on my crust to get it that perfect crunch, but honestly, I am way more concerned about the inside than I am on the outside. And the inside, it's just light and fluffy. I mean, people may be surprised that this is actually a whole grain bread, but that's the beauty with freshly milled wheat, is that you can still do these recipes with actual whole grain wheat, and it's so different than your whole wheat flour from the grocery store. Printable recipe will be in the description box below. Also, you can check out previous recipes. Just go to grainsandgrit.com/makebread365 on my website. And that's where I have a ticker of all recipes that we've done so far. So you can have those to catch up if you haven't been following along so far. As always, I hope y'all have a wonderful day and happy eating. Sure to serve this with your next Italian meal. It was perfect. And y'all have a wonderful day, and I'm going to get back into the AC because my face it's melting off. Yeah. See ya. Hey y'all, if you're following the Make Bread 365 challenge that we're doing for 2023, it is August, a new month, which means it is time for a new recipe. And this one is brioche bread, and we're doing it with 100% freshly milled wheat, and it's going to rock your socks. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So as I mentioned, I am participating in the Make Bread 365 challenge, which was started by McKenzie over at Little Farm Folk on Instagram, where we're basically challenging ourselves to not buy bread from the store. I will say that this particular recipe, I would say it's an intermediate to possibly advanced recipe. If you're a newbie to bread baking, and especially if you are a newbie to freshly milled wheat, I might get a little bit more experience with an easier bread under your belt before you try this one. Or you can do what I would probably do if I heard that and completely ignore it and just jump right in and possibly fail and make mistakes, but it's okay because you'll figure it out. So what makes this bread a bit more difficult is it has a ton of butter, as you can see, a ton of eggs. So the dough is it's just different. It's a different dough than a typical yeast bread, but the results are completely worth it. Now, the printable recipe will be on my website. It will be in the description box below. To follow or catch up all the recipes that we're doing for Make Bread 365, just check out grainsandgrit.com/makebread365. Now, with this recipe, I am actually doubling the recipe. So the ingredients you see here is not exactly what it's called for in the printable recipe. So do know that what you see me do, what I will be saying is what is in the recipe. But what you see me do is doubling what I'm saying in the recipe, because I apparently like to confuse y'all. So just keep that in mind. Now, for the flour that I like to use, I do like to use hard white wheat. That is because this is a yeast bread, so I do want a hard wheat. I like the hard white because it has a milder flavor that goes very well with the other ingredients. So now let's switch this camera around so you can see up close what I'm doing, and let's get started making this bread. So here we are again. I have the Bosch universal mixer that we are using. So we are adding our half cup of warm milk, and adding our 2.5 teaspoons of our yeast. Then we are adding our 2 teaspoons of honey. And then I just like to add a little bit of flour, not too much, but roughly about half a cup. I have just mixed that together. Do not overthink this part. And now we're just gonna let it sit, and it's going to get nice and bubbly, just like it does when we're doing our typical yeast bread. So I do like to keep this, wait about 10-15 minutes. It's been about 10 minutes. After we've got this, we're just gonna add in our 5 large eggs plus 1 egg yolk. We're gonna just add that in here. And then we're going to add our 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract, our 5 tablespoons of our cane sugar or white sugar, plus our 1.5 teaspoons of salt. And then we're gonna add in our flour. Now this is probably the most important part. And if you're gonna go wrong, it will be with the flour. Adding it, there is a huge danger of adding too much flour, which will give you too dense of a bread. The recipe calls for about 4 cups, 4 to 4.5 cups. So what you're gonna do first is you're not just gonna dump all this in. You're going to add just 2 cups of flour, and then we're gonna slowly add from there. All right, now let's mix this up and go from there. So as you can see here, basically ingredients, I'm looking to incorporate them in, but it's obviously a shaggy, rough looking dough here. That's what I'm looking for right now, but I'm gonna mix it a little bit more because of the egg in here. Okay, there we go. That's a bit better, because you could see in the last one that the egg, parts of the egg was still not incorporated. So I'm looking basically for everything to be incorporated, but it be shaggy, very, very rough looking. We're actually going to knead this for about 3 to 5 minutes. I'm just going to be doing this on speed 1 with my Bosch. Okay, so it has been 3 minutes, and as you can see, the dough is very, very wet. It is not pulling away from the sides at all. That is fine. Now we need to incorporate our butter, and this is going to take some time. So you're going to want to divide your butter into about 4 portions. Don't overthink it, just 4 portions. And then we're going to slowly add it. So we're going to add 1/4 of our butter. We're then going to knead it for about a minute or 2, all depends on your mixer. Basically, you're looking for the butter to be completely incorporated into the dough. So that's what we're looking for. So add 1/4, go for about 1 or 2 minutes kneading, add another 1/4, another 1 to 2 minutes kneading, add the 3rd 1/4, another 1 to 2 minutes of kneading, and then add the 4th 1/4, another 1 or 2 minutes of kneading. Oh, this is still on speed 1 on my Bosch. One thing you may find if you just did what I did, you may find you need to just stop it periodically to scrape down the sides. That is normal. All right, so I have pretty much all the butter incorporated in there. Now we're gonna add a little bit more flour. And what I'm looking for is I'm gonna be adding, just only add a little bit at a time, maybe 1/4 cup at a time. Because what we're looking for, it's where it's going to just barely start pulling away from the sides. We are not looking for it to be pulling away from the sides as much as it does when we are ready to knead when it comes to a regular yeast bread. This is just barely pulling away. So I'm gonna get this started. I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit more, and I'm just gonna keep this on a 1 until I start seeing it to where I want it.
And do know every time you add flour, wait for it to incorporate before you just start adding some more in. Okay, believe it or not, that's all I want to add for now. I can always decide if I need to add some more later. So you see here, it's starting to come off, but not completely. And now we're going to set this actually on speed 2 for my Brioche. What you're looking for is you're looking for the dough to basically be pretty much lifting off the sides of the bowl. It's incorporated as a nice dough, fairly smooth. And I'll show you here after 9 minutes, I'll check it and see if it's where we want it to be so I can show you what it's like. But as you can see now, it is shaggy, just starting to come off the sides of the bowl. And this is where you will be really tempted that you need more flour. Don't add it yet. You can add it later if need be, but right now, trust the process. So I'm going to set the timer for 9 minutes and I'll see you back here after that. All right, so here we are after 9 minutes. I already know that this is good, and here's why. So as you can see, as soon as I stop, it is starting to relax back down. That is fine, but it is completely cleaned the sides of the bowl, which is awesome. And more importantly, the dough looks smoother and shiny, and I can grab it and you can see where it just feels like a good dough. It feels like a very buttery dough. It's soft, it's kind of a shiny look to it, and definitely smoother than what it was. From here, you have 3 options, from quickest option to the longest option. So this is perfect for if you need it now or you need it later. So option number 1 is we take it from here, we shape it into our loaves, and then we let the loaves rise, and then we bake it. Option number 2 is we take this out, we shape it into a ball, we put it in back in the mixer or another bowl, cover it with saran wrap, let it rise for 1 hour, and shape it into your loaves, let it rise again, and then bake. Or option number 3A is where you can basically do the things in step 2. And option number 2, where you take this out, you shape it into a ball, you let it rise once, you deflate it, you put it in another ball, and then you cover it again with saran wrap and place it in the fridge for 8 hours up to 24 hours. And then that dough, you then can take out, shape, let rise into your loaves, and bake. The option number 3B is you can completely skip the first rise, just shape it into a ball, cover it with saran wrap, and put it in your fridge. I'm going to be doing 2 options today. I'm just going to take half of this, because remember I doubled mine. So half of this I'm going to take, go ahead and show you how I shape it, put it in my loaves, bake it so we can have it for the video. The other half I'm going to show you how I shape it for the first rise to put into my fridge. And I do not want to flour my surface because I want it, trust me, there's enough butter, it ain't sticking. Now ideally, in a perfect world, if I cared enough, I would weigh this, divide it evenly. I do not care about that today. I'm going to eyeball it. So there's one I'm going to set aside. So in essence, I think I need a little bit more here. So basically, if you were following the recipe, this is the amount of dough roughly that you would have. But the first step is if you're wanting to let it rise or you're wanting to stick it in your fridge, we're just going to roll it up into a ball. So no need to really think about it. You just kind of scrunch it up, go underneath, and then you kind of tuck it under. Do not stress about this too much. It's not like we're shaping a loaf. We're just shaping it where it'll rise well. And then you can just put it in your bowl here and let it rise. Or actually, we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. I'm going to go ahead and place this one in the fridge. Now the next ball of dough. Like I said, this is actually going to be able to shape 2 loaves. Though there's kind of 2 ways that I like to do this. Now you can take this and you can make these into hamburger buns. You can do various things. If you're looking for a brioche dough, this is the dough. And now do with it as you will. I have two different ways that I like to do this. So set one aside. These are my USA pans. And first one I'm going to do it's a faux braid or also like pull apart rolls. So I'm going to take this, I'm going to divide it into 8 pieces. Again, if you want to be perfect, weigh everything. Now we're going to shape these into just dough balls. So if you're familiar with how rolls work, same concept. I do want them to be tight. Shaping is important. So again, you can see how shiny my hands are. That's how much butter is in this. And we're going to shape it where I'm kind of pulling it down in my hands like this, and where I'm creating that tension on the top. You can also do this on your counter, but it also creates a smoothness to it as well. So you can see it's shaped. It's got a good tension. And then we're going to kind of stagger these in our loaf pan. So let's just continue. And again, this is a USA pan. It's just your standard loaf pan. These will be linked below. Got these loaf pans actually at Pleasant Hill Grain, which they are sponsoring this video today. I love Pleasant Hill Grain, so I'm supporting a small company. They are the cleanest grains that I ever receive. I love them, and I can get my bread pans. You can get your mixers or grain mills, everything like that. So to shop at Pleasant Hill Grain, just go to grainsandgrit.com/PHG, and I'll link it below. And thanks so much, Pleasant Hill Grain, for being a sponsor for Grains and Grit and for supporting all of us here, all of us grainies. They're basically a one-stop shop for all of us, and I love them. So there we go with the loaf. So you can see they're slightly staggered. Don't stress about it. And then I'm going to set this one aside for now. And now I'm going to show you the other cool way of doing this. Same type of loaf pan. Use my little roller. For these, I like to go into a rectangle shape, pull back, and then roll up tight like a sleeping bag. Okay, and then we're going to roll out into a long rope. That's about 14 inches long. And you're going to want to try and get it as even as you can. There we go. So this is about a 9-inch wide pan. You can see it's you can go a bit longer because you can always tuck in the ends. All right, so there's that one. You can see it's not quite even, but that's okay, and you'll see why in a minute. Okay, and now we're just gonna do a braided loaf. To do just a braid, very simple. You just take your 3 pieces, and then I like to mush the top together like this and go ahead and kind of fold it over a little bit. Okay, and then if you know how to braid, just braid. And I do like it to be, I do watch it though, because if it's too loose, it won't turn out very well. So there's that one. Over under. No, hold on, I need to stop talking so I can do this right. So just loose it, and then there we go. Okay. Over under, and then over on top. So I do kind of like, yep, there we go. Got my brain together. So when we get here to the end, I kind of pinch these together and under a bit, just like here. And then here, to even it out, I can kind of just do it like this because I do need it to fit into my pan. And then we're going to carefully lift it up, place it in. Now, I'm going to place these on top of my oven. I'm going to cover them up just with a tea towel, place them and start preheating my oven to 325 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, so I have my bread rising here, and then I just like to cover it with a tea towel and go ahead and preheat it. Now with the instant yeast, this will not take much time at all to rise. An eye on it, and I'm wanting it to rise until it's about half an inch or so, or no more than even with the pan. Here we are where it's risen. This has been about 45 minutes for me. My house, it all depends on how warm your house is. It is on top of a warm stove. We had it up to 325 degrees. It is about Yeah, maybe an inch from the pan. So not as high as I do a typical yeast bread loaf recipe, but this is going to be great. We're going to put it in the oven for about 35 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. So it's been 35 minutes and here they are out of the oven. They look beautiful. I'm just going to let them rest about 5 minutes in the pan and then I'll pull them out. And here they are out of the pan. So you may not be able to see, but these are not very tall loaves, and that's totally fine. That's what we're going for. But these are absolutely delicious. So these are the ones that are basically pull apart rolls. You can just break these off, as you can see here. And it is, oh, so good. No butter needed. I mean, if you want to, that's totally fine. I will not judge, but these are so buttery and good. And then this is the beautiful braided loaf that you can slice up very easily. Do know, as far as storing these, I would store them in the fridge if you're not eating them fresh. We're going to serve this up tonight. I've made some cheese grits and some eggs with the brioche bread, which is going to be amazing. I'm telling you, this is so very good. So again, printable recipe down below. Be sure to follow us on Instagram and post your breads. Tag me, Grains and Grit, and also hashtag MakeBread365 for all of your creations. I'd love to see. And hopefully this was inspiring. Oh, just like perfection. Perfection. Yeah, super good. I'm going to stuff my face now. So as always, hopefully y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see y'all next week. Bye.
All right, y'all, I'm popping in again because up next is ciabatta bread. And I have to say that this one, I never thought that I would actually be able to get an open crumb like you're about to see with 100% freshly milled wheat. But y'all, I did it. And this definitely took several different tries to get down with this ciabatta bread. But whatever I did, and I cut that thing open for the first time and saw those large open holes, that open crumb. Angels were singing. Okay, just angels were singing. I was completely floored. I could not believe it. And the bread is so delicious. So use this as an example. If people say you cannot get a really open crumb, those large holes in a bread with 100% freshly milled wheat, yes, my friends, you can. And that is actually something, there is a technique in here that I'm wanting to use with other sourdough breads and stuff to see if I can also achieve that with sourdough breads or just other breads in general to get an open crumb with 100% freshly milled wheat. So here it is with the ciabatta, and it looks beautiful.
It's September, which means that it's another bread for a Make Bread 365 challenge. And this time it is ciabatta bread. And if you thought that you could not get big holes, a nice big crumb inside of a bread made from 100% freshly milled wheat, well, I'm about to prove you wrong. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective and more. So if you're new here, I am participating in the Make Bread 365 challenge, which is a challenge set forth by McKenzie over at Little Farm Folk, where for the year of 2023 we are challenging ourselves to not buy bread from the store. And in doing so, me and several other content creators are providing recipes each month for a specific bread that month so that you can build up your repertoire to keep you from buying bread from the store. So in order to catch up for this year, if you're new, I have all of the previous recipes on my website. Just go to grainsandgrit.com/makebread365 to view all of those recipes and any future ones coming out. But in the meantime, this is September, and the bread for this month is ciabatta. And I have to say, this one kind of I was about to give up on it because what I was looking for is ciabatta is known for a very open crumb, the big holes on the inside of the bread, but it is kind of a bit flatter of a bread. Fun fact, the reason why we have ciabatta is it is an Italian bread, and it was a response to the popularity of the French baguette. And Italian bakers did not like, being one-upped. And so they came out with their own version, which is the ciabatta, which actually means slipper because it actually has kind of that slipper. It looks kind of like a slipper. So it's kind of a roundish rectangular look, a little bit flatter in the middle. But bottom line is we're ultimately going for taste, but it has that open crumb. And I was so excited to finally figure this recipe out where we could attain it with 100% freshly milled wheat, something that I haven't seen anyone else do. But just know there's no all-purpose flour involved at all. Now, we're going to get into this in the video, show you how it's done. There is a printable recipe as well, so check out the description box below. But do know one thing I did not say is this requires, I do recommend hard white wheat berries. That's what I've experimented with and have had the best success. And you're going to need to mill 3 cups of hard white wheat berries. You may need a little bit more, kind of depends, but you definitely want to start with 3 cups of hard white wheat berries. And then when I say in the recipe, whenever I say flour, that is already milled wheat berries. It is the actual flour. So let's get to it, shall we? First step is we're going to be making a biga. And so we're just going to be taking 1.5 cups of freshly milled wheat. Again, this is hard white wheat. And then we just need a 1/4 teaspoon of instant yeast and then 1 cup of warm water. And this is just the beginning. And so we're going to stir it up here. I just like to do this in a jar. Just make sure you get all of the flour so you can see that especially likes to be at the bottom. So you just need to keep stirring all this up. Again, you can do this in a bowl, no problem, but we just do it here. Stir it all together. It is going to be drier. This is not a very, very wet. It's not like a poolish. I'm not going to get into the technical differences between poolish, biga, so on and so forth. But bottom line is we're going to just mix this together. This is our pre-ferment. And as you can see, it's going to be kind of stiffer, thicker, not runny. This is normal. And we're going to let it sit here for about 6 hours. Just cover it up lightly. And I just leave it out on my counter for about 6 hours, maximum of 24 hours. Any more than that, just put it in the fridge. But we're going to let it sit. And all that this does is it's going to, the longer it sits, strengthens the flavor. And here it is. I like to do this night before, and this is the next day. So this is the next morning when I'm pulling this out. And as you can see, it is risen. It is bubbly. It has these beautiful holes in it, just like you are looking for in your perfect sourdough starter. Similar concept. And now we're getting ready to make our autolyse. And so this is going to be another 2 cups of freshly milled hard white wheat. And then we're just going to add 3/4 cups of warm water. And that's it. And then we're just going to mix this together. You can do this by hand, but it is, of course, easier in a mixer. Now, this is going to be a bit drier looking, but you're just going to mix it here until all of that flour and water has been mixed together. And this is what it looks like. As you can see, it's not very liquidy. It is coming together a little bit, kind of like that sandy type Play-Doh, if you've ever seen that. So similar thing. So it is moist, but it can still kind of crumble a bit, and that is normal. And we're just going to let this sit for about 30 minutes. That is allowing that water to kind of absorb into the flour. And here it is 30 minutes later. We're going to be adding 3 tablespoons of warm water, 2 teaspoons of instant yeast, 1 3/4 teaspoon of salt, and then all of the biga that we have already made. And like I said in the intro, this is where the work is done in the details. And so we're going to take all of this. And again, it's way easier in a mixer. Cover this up. And then we're going to start kneading this on kind of a medium-low setting for just 3 minutes. So on the Bosch, this is a 1. If you're on the Nutrimel Artiste, this would probably be around the 2 or 3 setting. And this is just getting that biga all incorporated into the flour, the yeast, the salt, all of that, getting it really mixed in. You're going to see it at first that like this, it's going to be looking drier. And then later on in a bit, you're going to see where it's going to start looking more moist. So again, this on the lower setting for about 3 minutes. So this is, of course, really sped up, but you can start seeing where this dough is loosening up. And this is where you have the potential of like your instincts are maybe wanting to say, oh, I should be adding more flour. Don't. It is supposed to be looser. It is not supposed to be fully necessarily like pulling away from the bowl like it does in our simple yeast bread loaf. recipe. So it is just a different type of dough than you're possibly working with. And you just need to trust the process. Don't be adding any more flour at this point. It is supposed to be loose. It is supposed to be a moist dough. So here we're coming up, we're almost to the very end of the 3 minutes. And as you can see, it's still, kind of attached to the side of the bowl. So I like to just go in at this point and just scrape off anything that's on the sides. And then we're going to do this for another 5 minutes, but we're going to be increasing our speed. So on the Bosch Universal Mixer Plus, I have this at about a 3 speed. On the Nutrimel Artiste, you're probably looking at about 4 to 5 speed. You're going for like a medium to medium high type speed. And we're going to be just letting this go and kneading for 5 minutes. So let's talk about while this is kneading, while we're kind of doing both a kneading and kind of a no knead type bread, because as you'll see later, we do like to go ahead and get this kneading process going. And then so it is going to be kneaded, but not exactly all the way, because then you're going to be seeing where we're going to have periods of resting time, stretching, folding, laminating. We're kind of using a ton of techniques here when it comes to this bread, because what kneading does is it is strengthening those gluten strands, which is what we want, because we do want a dough that is rising. But yet we have these moments where the dough is sitting and resting. We do the stretch and fold, the laminating later on, as you will see, in order to build up the big holes in the bread. So that's why we're doing a mixture of techniques, because they do different things. So here we are at the end of 5 minutes. And as you can see, this is still a wet dough. It's not what you expect, but it is actually looking good because the dough is stretchy. So like I said, this kneading is getting those gluten strands, which is giving us this stretchiness to the dough, but it is still a very sticky dough, all normal. And now we're just going to take a bowl and I'm just oiling it here. You can use olive oil. I'm just using peanut oil. And then we're just going to dump out our bread into this oiled bowl. And as you can still see, it is still very stretchy. That's good. And now we're just going to let it rest. And so we're just going to cover this with some saran wrap. Again, I'm just showing you how this dough is looking to kind of just give you a better idea. Very sticky, but yet stretchable. It's not breaking. So let's just cover this up with saran wrap. I like to put a little towel over it to get it a nice little darker setting. And then we're just going to let this rest for 30 minutes. So the 30 minutes is up, and now strength building exercise time with our bread. This is a stretch and fold that if you've looked at YouTube videos, you've seen. So we start at one place, very wet hand, you pull it up and you pull it over. So you pull out and over, turn it a little bit, pull out and pull over, turn it a little bit, a quarter, out and over. And then I just like to take it and kind of do this type of, I've heard it as 10 and 2 motion, where I'm kind of slightly tucking under a little bit while rotating the ball. It's kind of hard to explain, but my hands are going slightly under the dough, tucking it under into, basically, I'm just trying to get a nice ball that's a bit more tight on the top. This is creating a tension that is going to help strengthen this as it rises. And so all we do from here is we just cover it back up. We have that kind of smoother look on the top. So cover it back up and we're going to let it rest for another 30 minutes. So the 30 minutes is up. As you can see, this has risen a little bit in normal. And now we're just going to do a different method. And this is called lamination. So you're actually going to slightly wet your counter. I don't have a spray bottle, but you can do that. I just use wet hands. And then we're just going to gently take our dough. And as you can see, it's still sticky. You're going to want to make sure you have wet hands. And then we're just going to stretch it out. It should be stretching out just fine into a very large rectangle at this point. If it is not stretching out and if it's breaking like crazy, put it back in the bowl and let it rest a bit longer. But then we're just going to take it and then we're going to kind of fold it like an envelope. So we're just going to pull it out and then go over about 2/3 of it. And then the other part, go over that part. I mean, kind of hard again. And then we're just going to roll it up. Now, this is not a very tight sleeping bag. It's just a gentle roll. So we're just rolling that up and then just going to place it back into our oiled bowl. And here it is. So I'm not doing any necessarily shaping, but then we just cover it back up with saran wrap. And then this is going to rest for the longest time, for about an hour, maybe even hour and a half. And this is what it looks like. It should be rising pretty well. And this is the part where now you want to start making sure, especially you're using gentle hands, because right now this dough is going to be, you may see it kind of jiggle a little bit. That means that there's wonderful gas bubbles on the inside that we want to keep. So as you can see here, I've been flouring the top of that ball of dough. This is a large piece of parchment paper. I'm flouring that as well. I am flouring my surface, a lot of flour involved. And then we're going to very gently and carefully take this ball of dough onto the floured surface. And it should just plop out of that bowl. And then once again, more flour on the top. This is still, it's a moist dough, but we're going to carefully kind of start stretching it out to a little bit more of a rectangle. Again, don't mush this down because there are wonderful gas bubbles on the inside. You can tell by that little jiggle motion that we do not want to pop. And so here we are, we're just being very gentle. And then we're just going to take a very sharp edge and cut it down into basically 2 rectangles. Again, be gentle. And then we're just going to gently transfer this to our parchment paper. And it's when I'm on the parchment paper that I just like to shape it a bit more into that traditional rectangular slipper type shape that ciabatta is known to having. So you may find that you want to put more flour on the parts that was cut so it's not so sticky. So here we have our 2 rectangular balls of dough here, and then I just like to gently shape it just a little bit more into a rectangle. And then we're just going to cover this up and let this rise for 30 minutes. And while this is rising, time to get our oven ready. So I have 2 racks in my oven. I like to actually remove one because I actually cook this more on the bottom third of my oven. And in order to have room for the pan underneath, I just remove that rack. And so we have a rack on the bottom third of the oven. And then when I'm going to add in a container on the bottom, I just use a cast iron pan on the bottom of my oven because that's where we're going to be putting some boiling water. And then on the top, I really want a baking steel. I'm actually currently going to be getting one from Pleasant Hill Grain, which is the sponsor of this video today. And many of these type of materials, the mixers, the grain mills, the baking steels, you can get from Pleasant Hill Grain. And so here, as you can see, this is actually the top of a roasting pan. You can get a disposable roaster, but the point of that is so it'll help keep the steam in. So we preheat this at 500 degrees. We're going to get some water boiling. And this has been, and one thing I like to do is if you have like marble or granite type countertops, you may want to go ahead and have this rest on a cutting board, or this is my pizza peel. You can also buy from Pleasant Hill Grain in order to keep it. Otherwise, those cold countertops can suck the heat out of it. So these have risen for 30 minutes. It's time to go in the oven. So we're going to carefully place this. This would be easier with a baking steel because it's larger, but we're going to carefully place it in. I'm putting a towel down on the glass part of the door to my oven. Going to go ahead and cover this bread up very carefully with the roasting pan. And then we're going to be adding the boiling water into my cast iron at the bottom. This is going to create a wonderful steaming effect. And then we're going to let this bake for I believe about 8 to 10 minutes. And then after 8 to 10 minutes, we're going to be removing whatever you have to cover this. And then we're going to bake for another 15 minutes to get a nice crust. And here it is after 15 minutes. So be very careful pulling this out. I do plan on replacing these nasty oven mitts with some I'm getting from Pleasant Hill Grain. But here they are. These loaves are beautiful. Again, these are not very tall loaves, but it has a crunchy crust to it, and that is achieved by the steaming. So if you do not have a way to do the steaming, don't be surprised if you don't have a super crunchy crust. But I'm going to let these rest for ideally until they're cool, but at least 30 to 40 minutes. I'm impatient. And so I'm going to go ahead. This is resting after about 40 minutes. And we're going to go ahead and slice this open, moment of truth, to see what it looks like on the inside. And here it is. So as you can see, we do have some pretty good holes in here. I actually have done better, but this is not the whole story. So I'm actually going to slice some off here, slather this baby up in some butter, and it is so good. But as you can see on the inside, that is such an open crumb, and even more so, all those beautiful holes, which surprisingly can be obtained with freshly milled wheat. So here's actually the most perfect loaf that I've ever made. This is the batch before this one, and you can see I even got bigger holes, and I think it's because that last resting period after the lamination, it rested for more of an hour and a half. So I think that's why I was able to achieve bigger holes. But this is such a good bread. It is so delicious, and I have so many future recipes with this. But be sure again to check out this recipe. It is a printable recipe. I will have down below in the description box. And then check out Pleasant Hill Grain for all of your needs for this specialty type baking. So those baking steels, the grain mills, the mixers. I love shopping with Pleasant Hill Grain. They are a wonderful family-owned company, and every dollar that I spend with them, I know is supporting small business. So you can just go to grainsandgrit.com/PHG. And thanks to Pleasant Hill Grain for sponsoring this video. And again, be sure to follow us along for our Make Bread 365 challenge. Multi-grain bread is coming up for October. And again, just check out my website for all of the details and the past recipes. And as always, y'all have a wonderful day. Bye.
All right, so before we get into our multi-grain video, this is going to be a completely different video format and the shortest video of this entire marathon, and that's because it actually was just posted as a reel. Again, things schedule got really crazy, and I was unable to just post like a full video of a multi-grain loaf. But whenever I was experimenting with it, I was using other recipes. I was trying to convert other recipes, that were these multi-grains, and then they were not turning out well. And then all of a sudden, I was like, you know what? What if I just take my simple yeast bread loaf recipe, which was the first video that we covered in this marathon, and what if I just took that and added in different types of seeds and grains? Ta-da! And I did it, and it worked out beautifully. I mean, why overcomplicate things? So that's why this video is not a true teaching video, because really, just go back to my simple yeast bread loaf recipe, because that's the basic dough that we're going to be making, but we're just adding in the seeds, the different grains, and everything like that. So again, it might seem like it's complicated, but not really, because you really mastered one recipe. You just tweaked it a little bit to make it a multi-grain. So congrats, it'll be the shortest video. I'm still showing y'all the reel. I don't think I posted it here on YouTube. I don't even think YouTube had shorts at that time, which might be why it's only on Instagram. But that's where it is right now. And if you don't follow me on Instagram, you should. We have fun over there. It's just at Grains and Grit over on Instagram. But otherwise, the recipe again will be linked below. And this is just the quick video showing y'all how I'm modifying my simple yeast bread loaf recipe to make a beautiful and delicious multi-grain bread. So you want some Greek food, and what better bread goes with Greek food than pita bread? And I'm going to be showing you today how to make pita bread with 100% freshly milled wheat. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and if you're new here, welcome. I teach you all the things about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. And if you have been here before, welcome back. I love having you here. So today I'm going to be showing y'all how I make pita bread with 100% freshly milled wheat, and it still comes off soft and delicious, and where you can bend it so it doesn't break whenever you fill it with your gyros. First of all, we're going to be talking about what pita bread exactly is in case you don't know, what it goes well with, what type of wheat I'm going to be using, some tips and tricks, and then we're going to be getting to the actual recipe. So for those of you who want to skip ahead, timestamps are down below if you want to skip the things and get to the parts that you really like. And also just know that everything is down in the description box below. So the printable recipe for the pita bread will be there, as well as you can grab some freebies that I have for you. Sign up for our membership, follow me on Instagram, all the things always in the description box below. Before we get into the actual recipe, let's first of all talk about what pita bread is, kind of what makes it pita, because when you see me make this, you might be wondering what's the difference between pita bread and like a flour tortilla. And the biggest difference is that a pita bread, the purpose is you want it to puff up when you're baking it, and it involves yeast. It does have yeast in it, where flour tortillas have no yeast, and they generally have a bit more fat in them as well. And I'm still working on my flour tortillas with freshly milled wheat because we are very particular about them. So be sure to watch out for a video about that in the future. So the wheat that we are going to be using is soft white wheat. I've experimented with different wheats, and I did find that the soft white wheat is what allowed it to have more of a softer, go figure, type texture to it. I have tried it with hard white wheat, and you can use that, but I found the soft white wheat to be softer. Other substitutes for soft white wheat is you could try this with spelt, although spelt generally has a bit more of a robust, like not grassy flavor, but it's just going to be a different flavor. But spelt does act a lot like soft white wheat, but it is going to be a different flavor. You certainly probably could try Camus, because Camus is a more milder tasting flour that also works very similar to soft white wheat as well. So if you do try this recipe with another wheat, be sure to let me know in the comments below. I'm also going to be including a bonus recipe for you guys, because with the pita breads, I love making gyros with them. And I have literally the best tzatziki sauce recipe you have ever put in your mouth. And I got it from the source. I have a friend of mine who is Greek. She is Greek. Her parents are Greek. She married a husband who is also Greek as well. And she made this tzatziki sauce for our end of the year celebration for a homeschool co-op, and everyone loved it. And I had to have the recipe. So be sure to check that out. We're not going to be covering that in this video because it's super easy to make, but I do have it as a printable recipe in the description box below. And thank you so much to my dear friend who gave me this recipe and gave me permission to share it with all of y'all. So without further ado, let's get to the pita bread. So first we have to mill up the grains. This is Miss Nancy Nutrimill Harvest Stone Grind Mill. And you're gonna want 6 cups of soft white wheat berries to mill into about 9 cups of flour. And then we're going to take our flour over to our mixer. This is Miss Betsy Bosch Universal Mixer. You can do this by hand. And we're going to add 1.5 cups to 2 cups of our flour. Then we're going to add 1.5 teaspoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of yeast, instant or dry active yeast, and then 3 cups of warm water. Then we're going to mix that up and put a lid over it, and we're going to proof it for about 15 minutes. Once the 15 minutes are up, it should be nice and bubbly like you can see here. And we're gonna add in our 3rd cup of olive oil and then 2 tablespoons of salt. And then we add in our flour. I like to get up to a total of about 7 cups of flour, and then we just mix that all together. And then from here, I start gradually adding the flour in until it starts pulling away from the bowl. So you just need to add in about 1/4 cup at a time. Watch it, because you don't want to add too much flour. That will make your dough way too hard and stiff. So once in the mixer, once it starts kind of pulling off the bowl, then we start the kneading process. And we're going to knead this in a machine by about 6 minutes. 5 to 6 minutes until it gets pretty soft. If you're kneading this by hand, may need to be a little bit longer, but bottom line is you're wanting to get a nice, soft, pliable dough. And this was me checking it at about 5 minutes, and it wasn't quite soft enough for my liking. It kind of just broke apart pretty easily. And here we have a minute later, and now it's softer, not peeling apart or breaking apart as much. So we're going to remove our dough hook, and then I greased the bowl and then just put the dough back in, and we're going to let it rise until double, about 45 minutes. And I did put a towel over it, and here it is doubled in size, and we're going to deflate the bowl and get ready to start rolling these out. So here we are ready to roll these out, and you're going to want to lightly dust your surface with flour and grab a dough about a little over the size of a golf ball. And then this is a rolling pin. I like to use a French rolling pin, and we're going to just start rolling this. As you can see, it's a bit sticky. So if it starts sticking to the counter, add a teensy bit more flour. If it starts sticking to your rolling pin like it is here, you're going to need to dust your rolling pin. But bottom line is you're going to want to roll these out very thin. That is the key, as you want them as very, very thin like you see here, because they are going to puff up in the oven and you don't want them too thick. So again, we're just going to roll it out with the rolling pin, add flour if needed, and then you just kind of keep turning. This will take practice. As you see, I still do not have them in a perfect circle, but you just keep going. And you can tell that the dough is nice and soft because I'm able to tug on it and it not break apart, as you see here. And then we're going to put it on our pan, and we are going to put it in a preheated 450-degree oven. And here we are, we're going to roll out some more. Now I actually do use all-purpose flour sometimes for dusting because I don't want to add too much flour. So that's why you see the all-purpose flour out. And in between rolling, whenever they're in the oven, you're going to want to keep them in the 450-degree oven for 2 minutes. And then I like to flip them and bake for about another 2 minutes. And we will see that in just a bit. And as you can see here, this is not turning out to be a good circle. And so sometimes I just like to pick it up and kind of tug it around the sides. If it breaks, just kind of put it back together. Now here's where I like to store my tortillas. This is actually pitas. This is a tortilla basket lined with a towel that's covered. You do want to do this. And here they are out of the oven. And we're going to put them in our basket to store and then cover it. And this will soften the pitas even more and keep them warm. So let's put these in the oven. And here you see them in the oven. You can see they're starting to puff up. And again, 2 minutes, and then I flip them like you're going to see here. Be very careful not to burn yourself like I did a couple of times. And then we're going to bake them for another 2 minutes and then remove them out. And in case you're curious, this is the meat that I am cooking for the gyros tonight. And here's another way to store it, just in a nice bowl like this. This is one of those receiving blankets. I love these things. And this also keeps them nice and warm. And here they are. You can see they've puffed up. You can bend them. They're not breaking, and they are absolutely delicious. This is the perfect thickness for gyros because, again, they're not too thick. You don't want them that way. So there you have it, y'all. I would have a picture of what I served it for supper that night, but my family kind of inhaled it, and it was kind of quick because I do a lot of these recipe videos I'm filming while I'm making supper. So it's kind of difficult for me to get a full meal picture, but I served it with some meat that you saw me cooking up, and I chopped that up into smaller bits. And we had it and basically made gyros with some chopped up lettuce, the tzatziki sauce, and simple, but it was so good. And then I served it with a brown rice that all I did with the brown rice is cook it and just throw in some butter, salt, and some parsley. So a very simple yet delicious rice to go with the robust flavor of the meat and the tzatziki sauce. And if you're wanting to know how I prepared my meat for gyros, I'm going to link a few recipes for you below because I just use these recipes kind of as a guide. I still do my own thing when it comes to recipes, but those will be in the description box below for you as well. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Let me know if you try this recipe, and if you have any other requests for recipes, please let me know in the comments below. I have a running list, and I'm getting to tortillas for you guys. It's coming. It's coming. I'm also working on grits. So it's coming. And chocolate cake. I know everyone's been asking for chocolate cake as well. So these are all recipes that I'm working on to get them out to you as fast as possible. So if you are looking for more recipe videos, be sure to subscribe, hit the like button, follow me on Instagram at Grains and Grit, and hopefully y'all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye. If you have been missing croissants because you have switched over to freshly milled wheat and you want to make croissants with 100% freshly milled wheat to achieve all of those beautiful layers to make wonderful egg and cheese croissant sandwiches like you see here with your cup of coffee in the morning? Well, then stay tuned, my friends, because this video is for you. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel we talk all things about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. If you're new here, welcome, and if you're old, welcome back. So I'm really excited about this video because this is the final recipe for the 2023 Make Bread 365 challenge. So if you've been following along, we made it. And if you did all the recipes, definitely comment below to let me know how the challenge went. And also stay tuned because next week I'm going live to talk about a new challenge that is coming up for 2024. You're not going to want to miss it. So before we get to this recipe, many thanks to McKenzie from Little Farm Folk, who started this challenge at the beginning of the year to begin with, all about not buying bread from the store and challenging ourselves. So if you want to catch up with past recipes, you just need to go to grainsandgrit.com/makebread365 to check out all the great recipes that we have done throughout this year. And this one is croissants, the one that I've kind of been dreading all year because I was so intimidated by it. And while it does seem intimidating, I will say the process is not difficult, but there are a lot of little steps that you need to do, and detail does matter. But yes, you can make delicious croissants with 100% freshly milled wheat, and that's what we're going to do. So do know that the wheat that we have, that I am using in this recipe, is hard white wheat, which is what I recommend. I don't recommend a hard red, mainly because of the flavor. We're wanting a mild flavor, and a hard white, this is a yeast bread, and it just does really well in this recipe. Also, you can grab the recipe. That's a free printable recipe, grainsandgrit.com/croissants. The link is below, or just follow the link on the screen. And the biggest thing with this is I would actually watch this video with the recipe in hand because it's kind of a companion to the recipe. But without further ado, let's get to it. So first of all, this is the Nutrimel Artiste mixer. I add my 4 cups of freshly milled hard white wheat flour. And to that, I add the 1/4 cup of sugar, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 1 tablespoon of instant yeast is what I like to use. And then here are 4 tablespoons of butter cut up. And then we're going to give this a good mix. I'm just using the dough hook. And then on a slow speed, as you see here, I slowly start adding in the milk. This is 1.5 cups of cold whole milk. The cold does matter because you don't want to melt that butter. And then we're just going to get this stirred in and really start incorporating it. I like to add half of the milk first, let that start mixing together well, and then as you can see here, we slowly start adding the rest of the milk. And while this is going, let us pause here for a minute to talk about why I don't weigh ingredients. People might be asking, why don't I weigh, especially with what you're about to see that happens. I have another video for that. So when I say 4 cups of flour, I do mean the actual flour. 1.5 cups of milk, that's what we add in first. And as you can see, it already started almost immediately starting to form a ball of dough, which is good. That's where we want to be. But we are going to be kneading this for 5 minutes. But this is not a start kneading and walk away. So here's what we're looking at. It's kind of like it stays together pretty well. But now we're going to do this for a total of 5 minutes. But we are going to be watching this. So I'm actually going to be checking on this as we go about halfway through, because as you see, this is sped up, but as you're about to see, it's actually crazy enough starting to now adhere to the side of the bowl where it was coming off the sides of the bowl. Now it's starting to adhere. And I think that's because the butter softening and things like this. And this is where we start determining if we're going to add some more flour. I'm not adding it just yet. I'm going to be waiting until about halfway through. So here we are about halfway through this 5-minute kneading time. And you can see it is really adhering to the sides of the bowl. So I'm going to go ahead and start adding just a little bit of flour at a time. This is only about like 1 tablespoon right now. Let it mix in. And then also to just be
sure. I actually stopped it and scraped down the sides to make sure everything is coming together. I still found that it needed a little bit more because I am start wanting to watch to see when it does actually start to pull away from the bowl again. So again, this is all sped up, but as you can see here, you can start seeing it to pull off the sides, and I stopped adding flour because it's going to pull together even more for the rest of this kneading time. So that's what you're looking for. So at first, when you add the flour and the milk, it comes together as a ball of dough. When you start that kneading process, it then reverses and starts adhering to the side of the bowl. And then you just start adding in like 1 tablespoon, if even that, of flour at a time until you just start seeing it pull away from the sides of the bowl. And as you can see right at the end of this 5-minute mark, it is now pulling off the sides of the bowl absolutely beautifully into a dough. And this is a nice soft dough. It's kind of like a Play-Doh, not a typical bread dough. It is pulling apart. It is a bit tacky. We're going for tacky, not crazy sticky, and that's okay. Here I'm grabbing one of those really cool pastry mats I got from Pampered Chef, and we're just going to lightly flour this surface. And the first step is easy because we're just going to take this and form it into just a ball of dough. Don't stress out about this. There's a lot of resting time in here. So right now, don't worry if it's not like a super crazy soft dough like you would think. That's okay. So we're going to cover this with plastic wrap. We're going to put on a tray, and then I just like to cover it up with a towel just to be safe. And then the fridge in the fridge for 30 minutes. And then after those 30 minutes, we're going to bring it out. And this is where you use a tool that you don't think you would need in the kitchen, a measuring tape. And so, because we do need to measure these out exactly. So we're going to lightly flour the surface here. And then we're going to roll this out. We're going to be rolling it out into a 14 by 10 inch rectangle. The dough is going to be like a Play-Doh. It should still be workable just after 30 minutes in the fridge. So you're going to want to check this periodically with your tape measure. I find that getting the width is easier, and then I work on the length. So you'll figure this out. But the bottom line is you do want a rectangle. It tends to make an oval shape. So as you see here with my hands, I'm kind of working it where I'm getting those more of a crisp edge, more of like a more of a corner. Like we want a true rectangle size. This does matter in the future. But again, this one is coming out to a 14 by 10 inch rectangle. Now just cover this up with plastic wrap, and we're going to place this in the fridge for a minimum of 4 hours. 35 minutes before it's done, we're going to want to beat in our butter mixture as we see here. And then we actually have to roll this out into a 7 by 10 inch rectangle. So this is kind of a hack I do. This is one of those self-healing mats I use for quilting. And so I just like to take parchment paper, turn it over, place it on top of this, and then I just draw out a 7 inch by 10 inch rectangle. Makes it very easy. You can use your ruler if you want. And then that way I just have to then flip it over, and I can easily spread out all of this softened butter without me constantly having to actually use a ruler or measuring tape to measure it. So however you want to do this, we do need this butter to measure out to a 7 by 10 inch rectangle. So we're just going to smooth this out, have it pretty much as even as possible. But again, this is where your measurements do matter. You do want to get this right. And then once we get it to our nice little 7 by 10 rectangle, we then are going to place this in the fridge on another baking sheet for 30 minutes. And this will be coming out with our dough in about 30 minutes. You don't want this to be longer than 30 minutes because it may be a little bit hard to roll out, as you will see in a bit. All right, it's been 4 hours since this dough has been resting in the fridge, and now we do the wonderful process of lamination. So you now want to take your butter that's now fairly hardened and place it in the center of this rectangle as you see here. And then we fold over like a third of it over and then the other third of it over. As you can see here, the dough isn't quite matching up for me, so that's okay. We can fix it. So I just start pinching and molding and shaping the dough together to fully cover up this butter, and we're mashing all the seams together, making sure it's all kind of nice and neat. Doesn't have to be perfectly smooth, but bottom line is we want to make sure that the butter is covered. And then now we're going to lightly flour our surface, and then we got to roll this bad boy out. Tape measure again. This is now being rolled out to a 10 by 20 inch rectangle. You will be using some muscle for this, but again, make sure that it's exact. It's going to want to oval out again. Just keep those corners. We want a nice looking rectangle here. And again, I find that getting the width first, that 10 inches first, and then working on the 20 inches seems to work easier for me. And then we're going to fold it like an envelope. So 1/3 over and the other third over that. And that is our first lamination. And now we're going to lightly flour it again. We're going to rotate it. And now we're going to do this process again. So now we just need another 10 by 20 inch rectangle. So it just use the same process as before. If it's starting to kind of be like melty and sticky and things, put it back in the fridge for about 30 minutes and then get back to it. But here we are. And then we're going to just fold it over again into thirds. This is our second fold. And now we just cover this up with plastic wrap and put this back in the fridge for 30 minutes. And now it's been 30 minutes rest. And oh, look, we're going to do this process all over again. And so once again, we're just forming another 10 by 20 inch rectangle. The reason for this is what creates all of those amazing, beautiful layers with the butter and the dough, the butter and the dough. This is what does it. This is a lamination process. It is long, but now we're going to put this back in the fridge for 4 hours or up to overnight. All right, it's the next day for me. The dough has risen a bit. This is coming out. And now we're going to take this and we need another rectangle, but this one is actually an 8-inch by 20-inch rectangle. So just roll it out as before. I did find this time, because it's been in the fridge even longer, that it takes a bit more muscle to do this, and that is completely normal. And now we're going to cut this in half. So I like to measure this at the 4-inch mark on each side, and then just use a pizza cutter and just cut all the way down to get 2 long skinny ones. And then I just do this again for every 5 inches, because now we're needing to measure out 8 4 by 5 inch rectangles. So I just mark them and then just cut them again with a pizza cutter. And then we're just going to take our rectangles and then cut them in half into all of these little triangle shapes. And can we just take a moment to admire this beautiful lamination going on, all of these layers here with the bread and the dough? Awesome. So now we're just going to take these triangles and carefully with a small rolling pin, measure them out to about 8 inches. Now I will say here, this is just going to take some practice, but we like to cut a little slit at the top and roll them up, kind of mush that tip in to kind of keep it down as it rises. Try to form it into a crescent shape. It all depends on how big it is, and then place on a pan. And then now we're going to do all of these triangles. Mine do not look absolutely picture perfect. This is just going to take a lot of practice to get it done. And you'll start figuring it out which points matter. So the top 2 points of those triangles, you want to be as pointy as possible to help you get a length long enough to actually curve into a crescent. This may not make much sense right now, but as you do this, you'll understand what I'm talking about. But once we get them all done, ta-da! Here they are. It's going to take forever, it seems like. But now we're just going to cover this up and let them rise. And while they're rising for about an hour or so or resting, we're going to do our egg wash. And then here they are. They have risen quite well, and they'll rise even more in the oven. But you want to rise these for at least an hour while you're preheating your oven to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And then we're going to place them in the oven for 400 degrees, rotating halfway through. And here they are after just 20 minutes. They are beautiful, nicely brown on top. And look at all the layers. Oh, it's such a wonderful feeling when you pull this out of the oven and to see how amazing they look. But these are so good. You just want to let them rest for a little bit. But this is a bread that we can have hot. And here's just another angle, because I just want to admire all the pretty layers that we worked so hard for. And here's on the inside. With it being so hot, you can't really see them, but enjoy, my friends. So there you have it, y'all. I am so excited. This is such a delicious recipe. The only sad thing about it is that since it takes so much time and it is devoured like that in my family. So if you're wanting to know about freezing instructions, make ahead instructions, those are all in the printable recipe. And then again, just be sure to check out grainsandgrit.com/makebread365 to catch up on past challenges or past recipes for this year if you haven't done them all. And then stay tuned for next week where I'm going live on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to talk to y'all about the next challenge that I am actually doing for 2024. So as always, thank y'all so very much for watching. I hope y'all enjoy this recipe. If you post it to social media, use the hashtag MakeBread365 and also tag me as well. And as always, I will see y'all next week. Bye.
All right, y'all. We did it. Oh my word, what a year. And it is because of this challenge that actually inspired me to do the Grains Explorer Challenge for 2024, which we are in the process of wrapping up here in December. Actually, today I am experimenting with two einkorn sourdough breads. So wish me luck. And hopefully I will be actually I'm wanting to post that for y'all soon, just to kind of see how did it work with my sourdough experience with einkorn, the grain this month, which I do believe is kind of one of the trickier grains to work with. So if you made it this far in the marathon, congratulations. Let me know in the comments below all the baking that you did or whatever you accomplished while watching this, or if you just like the video and you just like to watch it and all the bread baking. So again, all of these recipes will be listed below. And if you want to check out our newest challenge with the Grains Explorer Challenge, then be sure to check out this playlist here. That includes all of our grains for the Grains Explorer Challenge. And no, I do not plan on doing another challenge for 2025. I think 2 years in a row, I might take a little bit of a break. But again, hopefully these videos inspired y'all to stretch your limits and the grains as well, that you learn a lot about different grains because there's so many options out there. And as always, I hope that y'all have a wonderful day and I'll see you next week. Bye.